Most people are taught to be polite to their neighbors. You answer the door, you hold a package, you help with a bin, you apologize for noise you did not mean to make. And when someone asks for a small favor, you try not to make it awkward. But sometimes that is exactly what makes you easy to choose. These are 7 neighbor horror stories about people who should have said no sooner, but did not want to seem rude, paranoid, or difficult. Some of them started with a welcome plate, some with a request in a driveway, some with a voice through a wall or a house that should not have been there at all. So, before we begin, think about the last time a neighbor asked you for something small. Then ask yourself how long it took before small became too late. I knew something was wrong with the plate before I knew anything was wrong with her. That sounds dramatic now. At the time, it was just a plate of cookies. I moved into the house on a Saturday afternoon in late September, one of those dry, mild days where every lawn on the street looked freshly cut and every porch light came on before it was fully dark. The house was a small rental on a quiet street outside Columbus. Nothing special. White siding, narrow driveway, chain link fence in the back, a garage that smelled like dust and old cardboard. I had taken the place because it was close to my new job, and because the landlord seemed normal, which felt like enough at the time. By 5 o'clock, I had carried in most of the boxes by myself. My kitchen was full of stacked cardboard packing tape, and those bright moving labels you buy at Walmart when you think being organized will somehow make moving less miserable. That was when someone knocked on the front door. Not hard, not urgent, 3 soft knocks. When I opened it, a woman stood on the porch holding a white ceramic plate covered in aluminum foil. She looked maybe late 50s, early 60s. Gray blonde hair, cardigan, small smile. The kind of person who seemed like she knew everyone's trash day and every dog's name. She introduced herself as Mrs. Keller from next door. "I always try to welcome people properly," she said, lifting the plate a little. "This street can feel quiet at first." I remember feeling guilty because my first thought was that I did not want to talk. I was tired, sweaty, and I still had a mattress leaning against the hallway wall, but she had brought cookies. Real cookies from the smell of them, chocolate chips still warm under the foil. So I smiled and took the plate. She looked past my shoulder, not in a nosy way, exactly, more like she was confirming something. "You're quieter than the last one," she said. I assumed she meant the previous tenant. I even laughed a little because I did not know what else to do. Then she pointed toward the side of the house. "The back fence latch sticks sometimes," she said, "especially before trash day. I should show you before it gives you trouble." I almost told her another time would be better. But she was already stepping off the porch, moving slowly toward the narrow walkway between our houses. Not pushy, not rude, just certain I would follow. And that was the first mistake I made. I followed because there was no polite reason not to. The walkway between our houses was barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. On one side was my garage wall, still streaked with old rain stains. On the other was Mrs. Keller's fence, painted white, but peeling in long strips near the ground. She moved slowly, one hand brushing along the top rail like she had walked that path 1,000 times. The latch was real. That was what made me relax a little. It caught halfway when she lifted it, metal, scraping metal, then gave with a sharp little pop. She smiled at me like she had just proven something harmless. "See," she said, "it gets worse when it's damp. You'll want to pull up first, then in." I tried it once. She was right. The latch stuck unless you lifted it a certain way. That small practical detail made the whole thing feel normal again. I remember thinking I had been unfair for feeling strange about her. She was just a neighbor showing me something I needed to know. Then she looked down at my hand. "Oh, you got rust on you," she said. "Come rinse that off. My sink's right here." I looked at my fingers. There was a faint orange smear across my thumb from the latch. Not much. I could have wiped it on my jeans. I should have. But she had already opened her back door. It felt ridiculous to refuse to wash my hands after she had just helped me. So I stepped into her kitchen. The first thing I noticed was the smell. cinnamon vanilla, and something older underneath it, like cabinets that had been closed for a long time. Her kitchen was very clean. Too clean maybe, but not in a way I understood yet. There were rooster magnets on the refrigerator, a paper calendar beside the pantry, and a small radio on the counter, playing some old talk station at a low volume. She turned on the sink and handed me a dish towel. That was when I saw the table. There was one place set, not a full dinner, just a small plate, a folded napkin, a fork, and a glass of water. It was placed neatly at the chair closest to where I was standing, angled toward the doorway like someone had expected me to come in and sit down. I must have stared too long because Mrs. Keller glanced over and laughed softly. "Oh, don't mind that," she said. "I always set too many places." But there was only one extra place. And it was not extra, it was mine. I did not say that, of course. I just dried my hands and told her I still had boxes to move. She nodded like she understood, but before I left, she touched the plate of cookies in my hands and said, "Don't forget this." I thanked her again. As I crossed back through the gate, I realized the plate felt heavier than it had before. I carried the plate back through my own back door and set it on the kitchen counter between two boxes marked dishes and small appliances. For a while, I tried not to think about the table in Mrs. Keller's kitchen. I told myself lonely people did odd things. I told myself some older neighbors still had old-fashioned habits. Maybe she really did set plates for people who might stop by. The problem was that she had not seemed surprised when I came inside. She had seemed ready. I left the cookies alone while I unpacked. I cut open boxes, stacked mugs in the cabinet, and found the coffee maker parts in 3 different places. Normal moving day problems, normal irritation. I wanted normal so badly that I almost let myself have it. Then the foil on the plate shifted. Not much, just a soft crinkle like something under it had settled. I looked at it for a few seconds before touching it. That sounds stupid, but I remember standing there with the box cutter in my hand, feeling embarrassed by my own hesitation. It was a plate of cookies from a woman next door. Nothing about that should have required courage. I peeled back the aluminum foil. There were 8 chocolate chip cookies arranged in a circle. They looked homemade, slightly uneven, still soft in the middle. Under them was a layer of white paper towel folded over the ceramic plate. At first, I did not see anything else. Then I lifted the edge of the paper towel. Something white was stuck underneath it. It was one of my moving labels, the same kind I had been using all day. Bright white with a colored stripe on the side and a blank space for room names. This one had been peeled off something and pressed flat against the plate's sticky side down. One corner was torn like it had been pulled too fast. My full name was written on it. So was my new address. Under that, in my own handwriting, it said kitchen/fragile. I did not move for a while. I just stared at it, waiting for my brain to make it less strange. The first excuse I came up with was that it must have stuck to the bottom of the plate when I accepted it. Maybe my hands had touched a box. Maybe the label had come loose somehow. But that did not work because the label was not outside the plate. It was under the paper towel, under the cookies. Someone had put it there before the plate ever reached my door. I checked the boxes on the counter. The one marked kitchen/fragile had a pale rectangle on the side where the label used to be. That was when I stopped pretending I was being rude in my own head. I did not eat the cookies. I did not throw them in the kitchen trash either. I took the whole plate into the garage, lifted the lid of the big black trash bin, and slid it underneath flattened cardboard and a torn bag of packing foam. Then I went back inside and locked the door from the garage into the kitchen. A few minutes later, I looked through the glass on the back door. The fence latch Mrs. Keller had shown me was hanging open. I was sure I had closed it. I stood there, staring at the dark gap between the gate and the post, and for the first time that day I understood something clearly. The latch had never been the favor. It had been the excuse. By the time it got fully dark, I had convinced myself not to call anyone. That is the part I still hate admitting. I had the label. I had the open gate. I had every reason to feel uncomfortable. But discomfort is a strange thing when it happens inside a normal neighborhood. It does not feel like danger right away. It feels like you are being difficult. So I did what people do when they do not want to overreact. I checked the locks twice. I turned on the back porch light. I dragged one heavier box in front of the garage door and told myself I would speak to the landlord in the morning. At around 9:30, someone knocked on the front door. Not the doorbell. 3 soft knocks, the same rhythm from earlier. I was standing in the hallway with a roll of packing tape in my hand. I remember that because I squeezed it so hard the cardboard ring bent against my palm. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Keller under the porch light. She was holding a folded dish towel in both hands. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, one button too high, but otherwise she looked exactly like she had that afternoon. Calm, small, harmless enough that I felt foolish for not opening the door. I kept the chain on and opened it only a few inches. "Sorry to bother you," she said, lowering her voice like we were sharing an embarrassing mistake. "I think I may have left something in your yard earlier." My mouth went dry. "What was it?" I asked. She looked past me again into the house. "Not for long, just long enough that I noticed. The little white label," she said. I had not told her about the label. I had not told anyone. For a second, all I could hear was the porch light humming above her. Then she gave a small laugh, as if she had caught herself saying something silly. "From the plate," she added, "I noticed something was missing after I got home." That explanation should not have helped. It did not make sense. But it gave me something to hold on to, and that was almost worse. My brain wanted an ordinary version of the moment so badly that it tried to accept the first one offered. She shifted the towel in her hands. "I hate to ask twice," she said. "Could you just let me check by the fence? I'd feel terrible if I left something on your property." There it was again. Not force, not anger. Guilt. I was suddenly aware of how the scene would look from outside. A tired older woman on my porch. Me behind a chained door, treating her like a criminal over a paper label. I imagined another neighbor seeing us. I imagined the landlord hearing that I had made problems on the first night. Then I remembered the plate in the garage trash. I remembered the label under the cookies. I did not open the door wider. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. "My landlord is actually on the phone right now. I'll check the yard tomorrow and bring it over if I find anything." Mrs. Keller stopped smiling, only for a second. Then her face softened again. "Oh," she said, "you already called him." It was not a question. I had not called him yet. I shut the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I missed the deadbolt the first time. I stood there with my forehead close to the wood, listening for her footsteps to leave the porch. They did not. For nearly a minute, there was only the hum of the porch light and the faint sound of her breathing on the other side of the door. Then the floorboard outside creaked once. I waited another 30 seconds before looking through the peephole. The porch was empty. I went to the kitchen and texted the landlord with a version of the truth that still sounded sane. "Has anyone next door ever come into the rental yard without permission?" Then I took pictures. The open fence latch, the back door lock, the garage trash bin. I even opened the trash and photographed the plate buried under the cardboard, just in case I needed proof later that I had thrown it away. The plate was still there. That helped. A little. Around midnight, when the house had finally gone quiet, I heard something from the garage. A small metallic click, not the garage door opening, not fully, just the sound of someone testing a handle and finding it locked. I did not sleep much that night. Every house makes sounds after you move in. Pipes tick, wood settles, the refrigerator clicks on and off. Normally those noises become background after a while. That night, every sound felt like it had intention behind it. I stayed on the couch with the hallway light on and my phone in my hand. Around 6 in the morning, the landlord finally texted back. "Mrs. Keller. She's been there forever. Mostly harmless, but she gets too familiar sometimes. Previous tenant had some complaints. Keep doors locked and let me know if she bothers you again." I read the message 3 times. Mostly harmless. That phrase bothered me more than it helped. It sounded like something people said when they wanted a problem to stay small enough to ignore. I called the non-emergency police line after that. Even while I was dialing, I felt embarrassed. I kept rehearsing how to explain it without sounding ridiculous. A neighbor gave me cookies. A label was under the cookies. She came back for the label. Someone tried the garage handle. The dispatcher was polite, professional. She told me to document everything, save the photos, and call again if Mrs. Keller returned or if I believed someone had entered the property. She also told me not to let anyone inside. That should have made me feel better. It did not. After the call, I went to the garage to check the trash bin. The flattened cardboard was still there. The torn packing foam was still there. The black garbage bag had not been moved, but the plate was gone. I stood over the open bin, not breathing right, staring down at the empty place where the white ceramic edge had been the night before. I lifted the cardboard. I checked underneath the bag. I even looked behind the bin like maybe I had misremembered where I put it. I had not misremembered. I had a picture on my phone from the night before. In the photo, the plate was half visible under the cardboard, with the foil still wrinkled over the cookies. Now there was nothing. That was when I heard a soft scrape from the front porch. Not a knock, a scrape, like ceramic being set carefully on wood. I did not go to the door right away. I walked to the living room window instead and looked through the side of the curtain. The porch was empty. The white plate sat on the welcome mat. It had been washed clean. No foil, no cookies, no paper towel. Just the plate shining a little in the gray morning light. There was one small smear of frosting left near the edge, even though the cookies had not had frosting. It looked like someone had dragged the tip of a fork through it. I waited another 5 minutes before opening the door. I do not know why. Maybe I thought waiting made it safer. Maybe I still did not want Mrs. Keller to see me snatch the plate off the porch, like I was afraid of it. That is the part people do not understand unless they have been in a situation like that. Even when you know something is wrong, you still feel pressure to act normal. You still worry about looking rude. The plate was cold when I picked it up. Underneath it was a small piece of white paper. Not a letter, not even a real note. Just one sentence written in pencil. "You forgot to say thank you." I took a picture of it and sent everything to the landlord. Then I packed a bag and stayed at a motel for 2 nights while he changed the garage lock and added a latch to the side gate. Mrs. Keller did not come over again while I lived there. That almost made it worse. She waved sometimes when I pulled into the driveway. She watered her flowers. She brought a casserole to the people across the street when their daughter had surgery. Everyone treated her like she was just a lonely woman with too much time and too many habits. I stayed in that house 6 more months. I never ate anything left on my porch again, and I never found a way to be rude enough to feel safe. The favor was supposed to last 3 hours. That was all she asked for. I was living in a second-floor apartment, then in a building that looked like every other apartment building on that side of town. Beige siding, brown carpet in the hallway, a laundry room downstairs that always smelled like dryer sheets and old coins. The kind of place where everyone heard each other's doors, but pretended not to. Packages went missing there all the time. Not constantly, not enough for management to do anything real about it. Just often enough that people complained in the building group chat, posted blurry doorbell screenshots, and started bringing their Amazon boxes inside the minute they got the delivery alert. I had lost one myself the month before. Nothing expensive, a $60 coffee grinder. But I remember how irritating it felt standing outside my door looking at the empty mat while the app said delivered. So when Megan from across the hall knocked on my door that Thursday night, holding a small cardboard box against her chest, I understood before she even explained. Megan lived in 2B. I lived in 2A. We were not friends exactly, but we were friendly in the hallway. We had held the elevator for each other. We had complained once about the washing machine that kept eating quarters. She seemed normal, tired most of the time. The kind of neighbor you knew by face before you ever knew much else. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is awkward." She looked like she had just come from work. Hoodie, black leggings, keys hooked around one finger. Her hair was tied up messily, and she kept glancing toward the stairwell like she was running late. "I have to leave for a few hours," she said. "Would you mind holding this inside your place until I get back? Packages have been disappearing again." I looked down at the box. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, taped neatly. No dents, nothing leaking, nothing that made the request seem strange. I should have said no, not because I knew anything then. I did not. But because I have always hated being responsible for other people's things, even small things. Especially small things, because if something goes wrong, you sound ridiculous trying to explain why you agreed in the first place. But Megan looked embarrassed. "I know it's annoying," she said. "I just don't want it sitting out here." That was what got me. Not fear, not curiosity, sympathy. I remembered my missing coffee grinder. I remembered the leasing office shrugging and telling me to file a claim with the seller. I remembered thinking someone in that building had walked past my door, picked up my box, and carried it away like it was theirs. So I took the package. "Yeah," I said, "no problem." Her relief looked real. "Thank you, seriously, I'll be back before 11. I brought the box inside and set it on my kitchen table right beside my mail and a half-empty glass of water. Then I locked the door and went back to reheating dinner. For a while, that was all it was. A normal neighbor, a normal favor, a small cardboard box I had agreed to keep because saying no would have made me feel like a jerk. I ate dinner with the box sitting on the kitchen table. That was the first thing I did wrong after agreeing to hold it. I left it where I could see it. If I had put it by the door and forgotten about it, maybe the night would have felt normal longer. But every time I looked up from my plate, there it was. Plain brown cardboard, clear tape, shipping label facing down at first like it was trying not to be noticed. Around 8, I got up to throw away my takeout container and moved the box so I could wipe the table. That was when I saw the label. At first, my brain did not understand what was wrong. The address looked familiar because it was familiar. Same street, same building, same unit. Mine. Then I saw the name. Mine too, not Megan's. I stood there with the paper towel in my hand, reading it again like the words might rearrange themselves if I stared long enough. The package was addressed to me, my full name, apartment 2A, printed cleanly under the barcode. For a second, I almost laughed. Apartment deliveries got mixed up all the time. That was the easiest explanation. Maybe the driver had left it at Megan's door by mistake. Maybe she had been in a rush and had not checked the label. Maybe she saw a box outside her apartment and assumed it was hers because that is what most people would do. That explanation made sense. Almost. I picked up my phone and opened a text to her. I had her number from the building group chat. I typed, "Hey, this actually has my name on it." Then I deleted it. I do not know why that embarrassed me, but it did. The message looked accusatory, like I was saying she had tried to take something from me. Megan had looked genuinely stressed when she asked. She had apologized twice before I even touched the box. So I typed another version. "Did this get delivered to your door by mistake?" I deleted that too. It still sounded wrong. In the end, I set the phone down and told myself I would ask when she came back. That seemed better, less dramatic, less likely to turn a small misunderstanding into a hallway issue. I turned the box slowly, checking the sides. There was nothing unusual at first. No company logo, no return address I recognized. Just brown cardboard and a strip of tape across the top. But the label bothered me, not just because it had my name on it, because part of it looked newer. The white around my name and apartment number was slightly brighter than the rest of the label. Not enough that I could have sworn to it, just enough that once I noticed I could not stop noticing. I leaned closer. The edges around my name were too sharp, like that section had been printed separately or covered or changed. I did not open the box. That felt important then. I kept telling myself I had not opened it, so I had not crossed any line. I was still just holding a neighbor's package, or maybe my package, or maybe a package neither one of us should have touched. I moved it off the kitchen table. I carried it into my bedroom and set it on the chair beside the closet. Then I closed the bedroom door. That made no sense. I knew it made no sense while I was doing it, but I did not want it near my front door, and I did not want it where I could see it while I waited for Megan to come back. By 9:15, Megan had not come back. That was not strange by itself. She had said before 11. I had no reason to expect her sooner. Still, I kept checking the time in that restless way you do when something is already bothering you, and you want the clock to prove you are being reasonable. The box stayed in my bedroom for almost an hour. I tried to watch TV. I tried to answer work emails. I even washed the few dishes in my sink because I needed something ordinary to do with my hands. But I kept thinking about the label, my name, my apartment number, that brighter patch of white around both. Eventually, I gave up. I went back into the bedroom and turned on the lamp beside the closet. The package was exactly where I had left it, sitting on the chair like a quiet accusation. I did not open it. I want to be clear about that. I did not cut the tape. I did not look inside. I only picked at the corner of the shipping label, just enough to see why it looked wrong. The top corner lifted easier than I expected. Under it, there was another layer of paper. At first, I thought it was just part of the cardboard tearing, but then I saw black print underneath the white. A second label. I pulled the corner back a little farther. The older label had Megan's name on it, Apartment 2B, across the hall. It was not a delivery mistake. It had been addressed to her first. Then someone had placed a clean label over it with my name and my unit number printed across the top. I let go of the paper so fast it snapped back against the box. For a moment, I just stood there listening to the low buzz of the bedroom lamp. I remember noticing stupid details, a sock on the floor, a laundry basket I had not folded, dust along the closet track, normal things surrounding something that did not belong there. My first thought was still not police. That sounds foolish now, but at the time calling the police over a box felt impossible to explain. I had no threat, no broken lock, no one hurt. Just a package with two labels and a neighbor who might not even know what was going on. I thought about knocking on Megan's door. Then I thought about how that would sound if she answered. Hey, why did you give me a package with my name taped over yours? There was no way to say it without accusing her. And if she was innocent, I would be dragging her into panic over something I barely understood myself. So I made a decision that felt careful. I would take it to the leasing office first thing in the morning. I would tell them it was misdelivered and that the label looked tampered with. Let them handle it. Let it become someone else's responsibility without me making a scene in the hallway. I took photos of both labels with my phone. Then I set the package back on the chair. That was when someone knocked on my front door. Not loud. 2 knocks, then a pause. Then a pause. Then one more. I froze in the bedroom with my phone still in my hand. For a second, I hoped it was Megan. I almost wanted it to be Megan because even an awkward conversation with her would have been better than whatever my mind had already started building. Then a man's voice came through the door. Hey, he said, Megan said you had something for me. I did not move. He waited. Then he said my first name. I stayed in the bedroom longer than I should have. Not because I thought the door would protect me from everything, just because moving felt like giving the moment permission to be real. The man had said my name, not my apartment number, not hey neighbor, my first name. He knocked again. Megan said you were holding it, he said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. That made it worse. If he had sounded angry, I think I would have called 911 immediately. But he sounded like someone picking up a jacket from a friend's apartment, like I was the awkward one for making him wait. I walked quietly to the front door and looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, maybe early 40s, wearing a dark canvas jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He was not huge, he was not doing anything dramatic. He had one hand in his pocket and the other resting loosely at his side. Normal enough that I hated myself for being scared. But he was standing slightly to the left of my door, not centered. The hallway camera was mounted near the ceiling above the stairwell. From where he stood, his face would have been mostly hidden by the angle. I did not open the door. Who are you? I asked. There was a small pause, like he had not expected me to speak through the door. "I'm Megan's brother," he said. "She asked me to grab the package." I looked across the hall at Megan's door. It was closed. No light showed through the bottom. "Can you have her text me?" I asked. He gave a short laugh. "Not mean, not quite. She's driving. She said you were helpful." That sentence landed exactly where it was meant to. Helpful. Like refusing him would undo the nice thing I had agreed to do. Like I would be making Megan's night harder for no reason. I said I'm gonna wait for her. The man sighed, quietly, patiently. "Look, I get it," he said. "You don't know me, that's fine, but she really needs it tonight." "What is it?" Another pause. "Her package." He said it too smoothly. I moved away from the peephole and picked up my phone. No messages from Megan, no missed calls, nothing in the building group chat. When I looked again, the man had stepped closer to my door. "You don't want to make this hard for her," he said. That was when the fear changed shape. Before that, I had been worried about the box, about Megan, about whether I was overreacting. But that sentence was not about the package anymore. It was about making me feel responsible for a problem I did not understand. I said louder this time, "I'm taking it to the leasing office." "They're closed. Then maintenance can hold it." There was no maintenance desk at night. I said it anyway. The man looked up toward the hallway camera, only for a second. Then he looked back at my door and smiled without showing his teeth. "They won't want to get involved." I backed away. My hand was already dialing. Before I pressed call, I heard the doorknob move. Not a hard twist, not someone trying to break in. Just a light turn, careful and testing, like he wanted to know whether I had remembered to lock it. I hit 911. As soon as the dispatcher answered, I spoke louder than I needed to. I gave my apartment number. I said there was a man outside my door trying the handle. I said I had already told him I would not open it. The hallway went quiet. Then I heard footsteps cross to the other side. The man knocked on Megan's door, once, twice, no answer. Then I heard something small click across the hall. A latch, not mine, hers. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. Megan's door was still closed, but it was not fully latched anymore. It sat open by less than an inch, just enough for a thin black line to show between the door and the frame. One officer asked me to stay inside while they checked the hallway. I watched through the peephole as he pushed Megan's door open with 2 fingers. The apartment beyond it was dark, completely dark, and from where I stood I could see one thing on the carpet just inside her doorway. A yellow sticky note, face up, with my apartment number written on it. The officers did not let me go into Megan's apartment. One of them stood in the hallway while the other checked inside. I stayed behind my chain door with the package on the floor behind me, still sitting in my bedroom where I had left it. I remember feeling stupidly protective of it by then, like if I took my eyes off it, the whole thing would somehow become my fault. The officer came back out after less than 2 minutes. "No one inside," he said. Megan's apartment was not empty exactly. From what I could see through the gap, there was furniture in there, a couch, a floor lamp, a pair of sneakers beside the door. Normal evidence of someone living a normal life, but Megan herself was gone. The yellow sticky note was placed on the carpet just inside her doorway. One of the officers picked it up with gloved fingers and read it. "Ask across the hall." That was all it said. My apartment number was written underneath it. The officer asked if I knew where Megan was. I told him what she had said earlier, that she had to leave for a few hours and would be back before 11. He asked if I had her number. I did from the building group chat, so I called her on speaker while they stood there. She answered on the 4th ring. Her voice sounded breathless, like she had been walking fast. When I said police were outside her apartment, she went quiet. Then she said, "Why?" I told her a man had come for the package. She did not say anything at first. The silence was long enough that one of the officers looked at me. Then Megan said, "I don't have a brother here." That was when I knew she had not been acting earlier. Whatever fear came through the phone was too immediate to fake. She asked if I was okay. Then she asked if the package was still with me. Not because she wanted it, because she sounded afraid that it was. When she got back maybe 15 minutes later, she would not step fully into the hallway until the officers told her the man was gone. She looked smaller than she had earlier. Her hoodie was zipped up to her neck and her hands shook while she unlocked her door. She told them the package had been outside her apartment when she got home from work. It was not from a delivery driver, at least she had not seen one. There had been a sticky note on top of it. Ask across the hall. She thought maybe it had been misdelivered to me first, and someone had left it at her door by mistake. She felt awkward bothering me, but she also did not want the box stolen, so she brought it over. That was the part that made me feel cold. Both of us had been trying not to be rude. That was all it took. The officers took my statement. They looked at the two labels. One of them photographed the box from every side and told me not to open it. Eventually, they said the safest thing was to leave it with the leasing office in the morning, unless I wanted them to take it as suspicious property. I wanted it gone, so they took it. I watched one officer carry it down the stairwell with both hands like it was heavier than it looked. The next day, the leasing manager told me the hallway camera had not recorded anything. The red light was still blinking, but the system for our floor had been down for over a week. She said it like an apology she had used before. No footage of Megan finding the box. No footage of the man. No footage of him trying my door. A week passed before anyone told me the package was missing. Not officially. Nobody called to update me. I only found out because I asked. The officer I spoke to sounded annoyed, then careful. He said the box had been logged, but it was not where it should have been. He said sometimes property got transferred between departments. I asked if someone had signed it out. He said there was no signature he could confirm. Megan moved out before the end of the month. She did not tell many people. One day her welcome mat was there, the next day it was gone, and her apartment door had a paper notice from management taped to it. I stayed until my lease ended, but I stopped accepting favors. I stopped taking packages inside for anyone. If a box was sitting in the hall, I walked around it like it was a dead animal. 3 days after Megan left, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a rectangle of torn cardboard cut from the side of a shipping box. I knew that because one edge still had a strip of clear tape stuck to it. There were 4 words written on the inside in black marker. Thanks for holding it. I took it to the police. They kept it, or they said they did. I never heard anything else. I still check every label now. Not because I am afraid of packages, because I know how easy it is to hand someone your name just by trying to be decent. If Mrs. Alden had asked me to come inside first, I would have said no. I wanted to believe that anyway. But she did not ask me to come inside. She asked me to move a recycling bin before the rain started, and that felt too small to refuse. I had only lived on Briar Glen Court for 2 months, long enough to know which neighbor had the loud dog, which house always left its porch light on, and which mailbox leaned a little too far toward the street. Not long enough to know anyone well. I waved when people waved first. I brought my trash cans in on time. I kept my lawn short enough that nobody from the HOA had a reason to send me a letter. That was the kind of neighbor I was trying to be. Quiet, polite, unnoticed. The weather had been strange all afternoon, hot and still, with a gray-green tint in the clouds that made the whole street look dim before sunset. My phone buzzed with a thunderstorm watch while I was pulling into the driveway after work. Most of the houses already had their trash cans and blue recycling bins pulled up near the garage doors, ready for the wind. I was getting the mail when Mrs. Alden called my name from across the street. She lived 3 houses down near the corner, 70, maybe older, thin white hair, narrow shoulders, always wearing those little rubber garden clogs even when she was not gardening. I had spoken to her twice before. Both times had been about ordinary things. The mail running late, someone's sprinkler flooding the sidewalk. Nothing that made me uncomfortable. That evening, she stood near the curb in a thin yellow rain jacket, holding the hood closed at her throat, even though the rain had not started yet. "I hate to bother you," she called. That sentence has a way of making you cross a street before you decide whether you want to. I walked over with my mail still in my hand. She pointed toward the far end of the court. The family down there left their recycling out again, she said. Storm's coming. It'll end up halfway down the block if nobody brings it in. I looked where she was pointing. A blue city recycling bin sat near the curb at the end of the street, alone in front of the empty stretch where the road curved into a cul-de-sac. It did not look unusual from that distance, just another bin someone had forgotten after pickup. I would do it, Mrs. Alden said, placing one hand on her hip. But I've been having trouble walking today. I don't want to slip once the pavement gets wet. There were plenty of reasons to say I could not. I had groceries in the car. I was tired. The sky was getting worse. I did not know whose bin it was, and I did not want to touch someone else's property. But all of those reasons sounded small compared to an older woman asking for help before a storm. So I said, sure, I can grab it on my grass. Her face loosened with relief. Thank you, she said. Just bring it up toward my driveway. I'll make sure it gets where it needs to go. I remember that sentence now, gets where it needs to go. At the time, I only nodded and started walking toward the end of the street. The air smelled like hot asphalt and rain that had not fallen yet. Porch lights were clicking on one by one behind me. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked twice and then stopped. The recycling bin waited at the curb, its lid pressed flat by the still air. I thought it would take less than a minute. That was why I did it. Not because I trusted her, because there was no decent way to explain why I wouldn't. The closer I got to the bin, the more ordinary it looked. That was what I kept telling myself later. It did not look abandoned. It did not look staged. It was the same Blue City recycling container everyone on the street used, with a hinged lid and two black wheels. There was a white sticker on the side with the city seal half peeled at one corner. A few dried leaves had collected around the wheels. Normal things can still be wrong. I reached for the handle and saw the number painted on the front, 41. It was not a sticker. It was not one of the printed city labels. Someone had painted it by hand in white block numbers right across the blue plastic. The paint had run a little at the bottom, like it had been done too quickly or while the bin was still damp. I looked down the street. The house nearest the bin was 36. I knew that because during my first week, there a delivery driver had left someone else's takeout on my porch, and I had walked around trying to match house numbers like an idiot. Briar Glen Court ended at 36. After that, there was only the curve of the cul-de-sac, a line of mailboxes, and the narrow grass strip where the city trees had been planted too close together. There was no 41. I turned back toward Mrs. Alden. She was still standing near her driveway with one hand raised over her eyes, watching me through the dim green light before the storm. That's from before they renumbered the street, she called. Her answer came too fast. I had not said anything. For a second, I almost asked her what she meant. Then thunder rolled somewhere far off, low and soft, and I let the question die before it reached my mouth. Streets did get renumbered sometimes. Routes changed. Old bins got reused. Cities were messy. Records were messy. Maybe 41 meant nothing more than a previous address or an old pickup route. That was the version of the thought I chose. The handle was clean when I grabbed it, cleaner than it should have been. Most of the bins on our street had grime baked into the plastic little lines of dust, where fingers always pulled from the same place. This one looked wiped down. The blue plastic was dull from age, but the handle itself had no dirt on it at all. The wheels were different. They had dried mud packed around the edges, dark and flaky, like the bin had been pulled through the wet ground recently and then left somewhere warm to dry. That did not fit our street. The curb was paved. The driveways were paved. Even the little strip of grass near the mailboxes was too short and dry to make that kind of mud. I pulled the bin back from the curb. One wheel moved. The other caught hard. The whole container jerked sideways and thumped against my shin. I hissed through my teeth and looked back at Mrs. Alden again. She had not moved. She was still watching, one hand at her throat, the yellow hood shifting lightly in the wind that had finally started to come up. It sticks sometimes, she called. Again too fast. Again before I asked. I tried pulling from a different angle. The stuck wheel dragged a few inches, then caught again. Something inside shifted with a heavy sliding sound, Not like bottles or cardboard, more like a stack of wet paper moving all at once. I lifted the lid just an inch. The smell was not garbage. That was the first thing I noticed. No sour milk, no old food, no beer cans baking in summer heat. It smelled like wet cardboard, plastic, and copier paper. Inside on top were a few flattened boxes and 2 empty water bottles. Junk mail sat curled against one side. Nothing that should have made the bin so heavy. Nothing that should have made the wheel lock up. I almost closed the lid then. I should have. But a clear plastic corner was sticking out from beneath the flattened cardboard, pressed tight against the blue wall of the bin. It looked too clean to be trash, too deliberate. I told myself I was only checking what had jammed the wheel. That was the excuse. I lifted the lid a little higher and reached in. The plastic corner belonged to a folder. Not a manila folder, not something damp and half-ruined like the junk mail around it. It was one of those clear plastic folders with a snap button on the front, the kind people use to keep documents dry in a backpack. It had been tucked under the flattened cardboard so neatly that I knew it had not fallen there by accident. For a few seconds, I only held the edge of it between 2 fingers. I remember thinking that I had already crossed a line. It was not my bin. It was not my folder. If Mrs. Alden saw me standing there with the lid open and my hand inside, there was no version of the story where I looked innocent. I was the new neighbor digging through someone else's recycling before a storm. That should have made me stop. Instead, I pulled the folder free. The bin shifted again when I lifted it, and something underneath slid with it. The folder was heavier than it looked. Rain began to tap against the plastic lid over my head, soft at first, a few scattered drops that made dark circles on the blue surface. I opened the snap. Inside were papers. Not old bills, not coupons, not discarded school forms. Lists. The first page was a printed street map of Briar Glen Court. Not a city map. Not something official. It looked like someone had taken a screenshot, printed it, and written over it by hand. Every house on the court was marked with a name. I recognized some of them. The Wilkes family at the corner. The Carsons with the loud dog. Mrs. Alden 3 houses down. My own house had a red circle around it. I felt my face go hot, then cold. Under the map was a contact sheet. Names, phone numbers, car descriptions, work hours, emergency contacts. Some entries had small notes beside them in pencil. Day sleeper. Son visits weekends. Keeps spare key with neighbor. Does not answer unknown calls. It was the kind of information a neighborhood might collect for emergencies if everyone had agreed to it. That was the thought I reached for first because I needed it. Maybe this was some old block watch packet. Maybe Mrs. Alden had once organized storm checks or senior assistance. Maybe someone had printed too much and thrown it away. Then I found my line. My full name was there. My cell number, my car, the time I usually left for work, the time I usually came home. I had never given any of that to Mrs. Alden. I had not even given my phone number to the HOA yet, at least not anywhere public. I had filled out one online form when I moved in, and I had assumed it went to some property management company in another city. Seeing it there inside a recycling bin marked with a house number that did not exist made the street around me feel suddenly staged. I looked back toward Mrs. Alden. She was still by her driveway, watching. She did not call out. She did not ask what I was doing. That was worse. I turned another page. The next sheet had check marks beside different houses. Some names had dates beside them. Some had short notes written in the margins. Helpful if asked directly. Talks too much. Calls police quickly. Needs neighbor present. I should have put the folder back then. I know that. I had enough. More than enough. But my thumb caught the corner of a smaller slip of paper folded into the back pocket of the folder. It was not printed like the others. It was written in pencil. Only one line. Polite. Does not like confrontation. No name was written above it. It did not need one. The slip had been tucked behind my contact sheet. For a moment, I could not hear the storm or the dog barking somewhere behind me or the distant sound of a garage door opening. All I could hear was Mrs. Alden's voice from a few minutes earlier. I hate to bother you. A sentence shaped like a key. I pushed the slip back into the folder with shaking fingers. I tried to close the snap, but it would not line up the first time. My hands felt too large and clumsy. The rain was coming faster now, tapping on the bin lid and spotting the papers before I could get them covered. I slid the folder back under the cardboard exactly where I had found it. At least I tried to. It would not sit right. One corner still showed. The bin seemed fuller than before, like the papers had expanded while I was looking at them. From across the street, Mrs. Alden called my name. Not loudly, not angrily, gently. The way someone calls you when they have been patient long enough. "Everything all right over there?" I closed the lid. My hand was still on the handle. I wanted to say I had seen the folder. I wanted to ask why my name was inside it. I wanted to ask what the number 41 meant and why she had answered questions before I asked them. But the pencil note sat in my head like an instruction. Polite does not like confrontation. Mrs. Alden raised one hand toward me. The first real drops of rain began to darken the street between us. "Bring it up this way," she called, "before it really starts coming down." I stood there with one hand on the handle, trying to decide whether refusing a favor could sound like an accusation. And that was when I understood I had already been handled before I ever touched the bin. I let go of the handle. The bin rocked once and settled against the curb. Rain tapped lightly on the lid, not hard enough to send anyone running yet, but enough that the street had started to shine in patches under the porch lights. A car passed at the mouth of the court and disappeared around the corner, its tires hissing on pavement that was only beginning to get wet. I remember wanting someone else to come outside. Anyone. A man walking his dog. A teenager taking trash out. One of the families whose names I had just seen in that folder. I wanted another normal person to step into the scene and make it ordinary again. No one did. Mrs. Alden lifted her hand and waved me forward. "Bring it up this way," she called, "before it really starts coming down." Her voice still had that small, apologetic sound. The same tone she had used when she said she hated to bother me. If I had not seen my name in that folder, I would have thought she was only worried about the storm. I gripped the handle again. The bin rolled smoothly now. That bothered me almost as much as the papers. The wheel that had jammed hard against the curb moved without resistance, like whatever had caught it had been removed or had never really been there. I pulled it up the slight slope of the street toward Mrs. Alden's driveway. She backed away as I got closer. Not far, just enough to make room. Her garage door was already open. I had not heard it lift. Inside, one yellow bulb glowed from the ceiling. It gave light to the first few feet of concrete and left everything behind that in a gray-brown shadow. I could see plastic storage shelves along one wall, a folded lawn chair, a stack of old flower pots. Nothing unusual enough to point at. Still, I stopped at the edge of the driveway. "I can leave it here," I said. Mrs. Alden looked at the bin, then at the open garage. "Just inside, if you don't mind." There it was. The favor had changed. At the curb, it had been helping an older neighbor before a storm. In the driveway, it became entering her garage with a recycling bin that had my personal information inside it. I said, "I think here is fine." For the first time, Mrs. Alden did not answer right away. Rain collected on the hood of her jacket and ran down the sides of her face. She looked suddenly tired, smaller, like I had failed a test I did not know I had been taking. "They'll see it," she said. I looked past her into the garage. "Who will?" Her mouth moved a little before she spoke. "Please don't make me explain it to them." The sentence was soft. That made it worse. If she had snapped at me, I could have snapped back. If she had threatened me, I could have left without feeling guilty. But she sounded frightened and disappointed, and that is a powerful combination when you are the kind of person who has spent most of your life trying not to make scenes. My hand stayed on the bin handle. The garage was only a few feet away. Less than that. I could have pushed the bin in, turned around, and left. That was the argument my brain offered me. Just finish the favor. Just do the last part. Do not stand in the rain arguing with an old woman on your own street. Then I thought of the pencil note. Polite does not like confrontation. I let go. "I'm sorry," I said. "I have something on the stove." It was a bad lie. I had nothing cooking. My groceries were still in the car. But it was the first excuse that came out sounding normal enough. Mrs. Alden looked at my house. The way she did it made me feel exposed, not watched through a window, not like that, more like she was checking where I belonged on a list. "You already touched it," she said. I did not answer. I backed away from the bin one step, then another. I expected her to get angry. I expected her to call after me and tell me I was being rude. She did neither. She only reached for the handle herself. Her hand did not shake anymore. I crossed the street faster than I meant to. My mailbox was still open. My groceries were still in the car. The rain was coming harder now, darkening my sleeves and sticking my shirt to my back. When I reached my porch and turned around, Mrs. Alden's garage door was lowering. The blue bin was gone from the driveway. For 1 second before the door closed completely, I saw the painted white number again, 41. Then the garage shut, and every porch light on that side of the street went out at the same time. I did not go back outside. That feels important to say because whenever I have told this story, someone always asks why I did not check the garage, or why I did not knock on Mrs. Alden's door, or why I did not take the folder out of the bin when I had the chance. The answer is simple. I was scared by then, not movie scared, not screaming scared, the kind of scared that makes you suddenly practical. Lock the door, turn on the lights, put distance between yourself and whatever just made the world feel wrong. I closed my front door and locked the deadbolt. Then I locked the smaller chain I almost never used. My groceries stayed in the car until the storm passed, because walking back down the driveway felt impossible, even though my car was only 20 feet away. For a few minutes, I stood in the front room with rain hitting the windows and tried to make the whole thing smaller. Maybe the folder was some neighborhood emergency list. Maybe the notes were from an over-involved HOA person. Maybe Mrs. Alden was part of some block watch group that had lost all sense of boundaries. Maybe the number 41 was an old container number and not an address. I gave myself every reasonable explanation I could find. None of them explained the pencil note. Polite, does not like confrontation. That sentence kept coming back in my head because it was not data. It was strategy. Whoever wrote it had not been recording who I was. They had been recording how to get me to do something. I took out my phone and wrote everything down before I could convince myself I was remembering it wrong. Blue recycling bin, painted 41, Mrs. Alden, plastic folder, contact sheets, work schedule, the note about me, garage, they'll see it, you already touched it. Then I checked the time, 6:41 p.m. I do not know why that mattered, but I wrote it down too. The storm got worse after that. For almost an hour, rain came down hard enough to blur the streetlights. Thunder rolled over the neighborhood in long, slow waves. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with a weather alert, and every time it did, I jumped. Mrs. Alden did not come over. No one did. That should have helped. Instead, it made the street feel coordinated, quiet on purpose. The next morning, the sky was clear in that washed-out way it gets after heavy rain. Branches were down in a few yards. A trash can had rolled into the middle of the court. The air smelled like wet grass and storm drains. Mrs. Alden's garage was closed. There was no blue bin in front of her house. I called the city sanitation office a little after 9. I tried to make my voice sound normal. I said I had a question about a recycling container on Briar Glen Court. The woman on the phone asked for my address and I gave it to her. That part still bothers me now. I gave it because it was normal, because offices asked for addresses, because I was trying to do this the proper way. I asked if there was a recycling bin assigned to house number 41 on our street. She clicked around for a while. No active address 41 on Briar Glen Court, she said. I asked if there had been a renumbering at some point. More clicking. Not in the current city record. I asked about the container itself. A blue recycling bin with 41 painted on it. She said painted numbers were not official identifiers. The city used serial numbers stamped into the plastic or on barcoded stickers. Then she asked if I had the serial number. I did not. I almost ended the call there. Then I thought of my name in that folder. I told her there may have been personal information inside the container. I kept it vague. I said I had seen documents that should not have been there. She transferred me to a supervisor who told me to file a non-emergency police report if I believed private information had been collected or misused. So I did. The officer who took the report sounded polite but not surprised in the way I wanted him to be. He asked whether anyone had threatened me. I said no. He asked whether Mrs. Alden had entered my property. I said no. He asked whether I still had the documents. I said no because they were in the bin. There was a pause after that. A pause just long enough for me to understand how the story sounded. I had opened someone else's recycling bin, seen a folder, put it back, refused to push the bin into a garage, and now I wanted someone to treat it like a crime. The officer told me the report would be documented. He also told me not to engage with Mrs. Alden if she approached me again. That afternoon when I got home, 3 neighbors were standing near Mrs. Alden's driveway. They were not doing anything strange, just talking. One of them held a rake. Another had a coffee mug. Mrs. Alden stood with them in her yellow jacket, though the rain had ended hours earlier. When I pulled into my driveway, all 4 of them looked over. Only for a second. Then they went back to talking. I sat in my car longer than I needed to, keys in my hand, watching them through the windshield. That was when I understood the social part of it. If I said something, I would be the new person accusing a 70-year-old woman of keeping secret files in a recycling bin. If I said nothing, I had to keep living on a street where somebody had written down the safest way to pressure me. At 4:38 p.m., the sanitation office called me back. It was the same woman from earlier, but her voice had changed. She sounded careful now. She said a supervisor found a note in the route log from the previous evening. Not an account, not an active container record, just a route note. I asked what it said. She hesitated. Then she read it to me. Blue bin 41 returned by resident. I asked which resident. Another pause. Then she said my name. I made her repeat it. Not because I had not heard her. I had. I just needed to hear someone else say my name in that sentence again to make sure I was not filling it in myself. The woman at the sanitation office sounded uncomfortable. She read the note one more time. Blue bin 41 returned by resident. Then she said my full name. I asked her when the note had been entered. There was more clicking on her keyboard. I could hear someone talking in the background on her end. Another office voice asking about missed pickup forms and bulk item tags. Ordinary city noise. That made it feel worse. Whatever this was, it was sitting inside a normal system, beside normal complaints about trash cans and yard waste. The woman said yesterday, 6:17 p.m. I looked at the notepad on my kitchen counter. 6:41 p.m. was the time I had written down after I locked my door. The time after I had already touched the bin, found the folder, and come back inside. But 6:17 was earlier. At 6:17 I had been getting my mail. At 6:17 Mrs. Alden had not called to me yet. At 6:17 I did not even know the blue bin existed. I told the woman that could not be right. She gave the kind of tired laugh people give when they are trying to stay helpful without getting involved. Could be a system error, she said. Those route notes are sometimes entered after the fact. I asked if they could see who entered it. She paused again. It just says resident return confirmed. I asked what that meant. She did not know. I asked if there was any way to remove my name from that note. She told me she could add a correction. She could not delete an existing route note. That phrase stayed with me. Existing route note. Like the thing had already become more official than my memory of it. I thanked her because I did not know what else to do. Even then, even with my name in a log attached to something impossible, I thanked her. I hung up and stood in my kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand. For the rest of the day, nothing happened. That was the strangest part. Mrs. Alden did not knock. The police did not call back. No city truck came looking for a blue bin marked 41. The neighbors across the street went back to mowing wet grass and dragging fallen branches to the curb. By evening, Briar Glen Court looked like itself again. I almost let it. False normal is the easiest thing in the world to accept. You tell yourself that if danger were real, it would keep happening loudly. It would announce itself. It would give you permission to react. This did not. It folded back into the neighborhood. At sunset, I went out to check the mailbox. I waited until the street looked empty. That is another thing I hate admitting. I stood behind my front door like a child watching through the narrow glass panel beside it, waiting for no one to be outside before I walked 30 feet to get my mail. There were 3 envelopes, an electric bill, a grocery flyer, a postcard from a dentist office I had never visited. Under those was a folded sheet of paper. No envelope, no stamp, just a single photocopied page folded once placed at the back of the mailbox where I would have to reach all the way in to touch it. I knew what it was before I opened it. The paper had that gray, slightly dirty look copies get after being copied too many times. Across the top in block letters it said, "Neighborhood Emergency Contacts." Most of the page was blanked out with thick black marker. Only one line was left visible, my line, my name, my phone number, my car, my work schedule. And under it, circled 3 times in pencil, was the note, "Polite, does not like confrontation." There was no threat written under it, no instruction, no warning to stay quiet. Nothing that would have made it easier to take to the police and explain why I could not sleep in my own house. Just that one sentence. I looked across the street. Mrs. Alden's porch light was on. Her curtains were closed. Her driveway was empty except for one green trash can and a pair of wet rubber garden clogs beside the garage door. No blue bin, number 41, nothing I could point to. I kept that paper for almost a year. Not because it proved anything, because it was the first time I understood that someone had mistaken my manners for permission. I only planned to stay 20 minutes. That was what I told myself when Kelly Morris waved me over from her backyard fence. She and her husband Ryan lived 2 houses down from me, and they were the kind of neighbors who somehow knew everyone's name before you knew theirs. Not in a creepy way, at least not at first. Just friendly, organized. The sort of people who hosted small cookouts and remembered who drank diet soda. It was a Saturday evening in early June. Warm, bright, and normal enough that nothing about it felt worth remembering. Ryan had burgers on the grill. Someone had set up a folding table with paper plates, chips, lemonade, and a bowl of pasta salad nobody seemed to be eating. Kids ran through a sprinkler in the yard next door, screaming every time the water turned in their direction. I had only come because Kelly had invited me twice. The first time I said I might stop by. The second time she said, "You have to. Everyone on this side of the block is coming." That made it harder to refuse. I did not want to become the quiet new neighbor people described with a shrug. So I changed shirts, walked over with a 12-pack of soda, and told myself I would make an appearance, smile, and leave before it got dark. For the first few minutes that worked. Kelly took the soda from me and thanked me like I had brought something expensive. Ryan waved from behind the grill. A man whose name I could not remember asked if I had settled in okay. It was all harmless small talk, the kind that feels awkward but safe because everyone is busy eating and pretending not to notice when conversation runs out. Then Kelly touched my elbow. "Oh," she said, lowering her voice. "Could you sit with Carol for a minute?" She nodded toward the fence. An older woman sat there in a folding chair slightly outside the main group. She had short white hair, a pale blue blouse, and both hands wrapped around a plastic cup of lemonade. She looked uncomfortable, but not strange, just out of place in the way older relatives sometimes do at neighborhood things. "This is Carol," Kelly said. "She's family." She did not say whose family. Carol gave me a small smile. Kelly leaned a little closer and said, "She gets nervous around groups. You're easy to talk to." That was the line that trapped me. Easy to talk to. It sounded like a compliment, but it also gave me a job. If I walked away after that, I would not just be leaving a chair. I would be leaving an elderly woman alone after someone had told me she was anxious. So I pulled over a spare folding chair and sat beside her. Carol looked at me with the same small smile. "Thank you," she said. "I do better when someone sits with me." I told her it was no problem, and at that moment I meant it. For the first couple of minutes, Carol was exactly what Kelly had made her sound like. Quiet, a little nervous, not frightening, not even unusual. She asked which house was mine, even though Kelly had already pointed me out from across the yard. I told her I lived in the gray house with the maple tree out front. She nodded like she knew it, then asked how long I had been there. I told her a few months. "That's nice," she said. "It takes time for a house to learn you." I laughed because I thought she was trying to be charming. Behind us, Ryan called out that burgers were almost ready. Someone opened a cooler. A kid ran past with wet grass stuck to his bare feet. The yard was full of ordinary noise, and I think that was why I kept trying to make Carol ordinary too. She asked where I worked. I gave a vague answer. She asked if I had family nearby. I said no, not really. Then she looked down into her cup and said, "That must be hard on you, Mikey." I went still. No one called me that anymore. My grandmother had. Only my grandmother. She died when I was in college, and even when she was alive, she only used it when she wanted me to feel 6 years old again. It was not on my social media. It was not a nickname friends used. It was one of those small, private names that belongs to a house you do not live in anymore. I turned toward Carol. "What did you call me?" She looked up slowly. For 1 second, her face had no expression at all. Then she smiled. "Oh," she said, "did I guess wrong? I should have stood up then. Instead, I did what people do when something wrong happens in front of other people. I tried to make it smaller. Maybe I had misheard her. Maybe she had said Mike and my brain filled in the rest. Maybe Kelly had told her my name, and Carol had added the ending by accident. All weak explanations, all better than making a scene in someone's backyard. I forced a laugh and said, "No one really calls me that." Carol tilted her head, but someone did. The words were soft enough that the people by the grill probably could not hear them. I looked over at Kelly. She was handing paper plates to 2 neighbors and laughing at something Ryan said. Nothing in her face suggested she was watching us. Nothing suggested she had set me up. That helped, a little. I put both hands on my knees and started to stand. "I'm going to grab a drink," I said. Carol's hand moved to the arm of my chair. She did not touch me yet. She only rested her fingers there, pale and thin against the black metal frame. "Don't leave yet," she said. "I'm better when someone sits with me." The sentence was almost the same as before. That made it feel rehearsed. But she looked so frail sitting there with her lemonade and her nervous little smile that standing up suddenly felt cruel. A woman I barely knew had just told me she needed company. Other people were around. Food was being served. Nothing had actually happened that I could explain without sounding strange. So I stayed seated. Carol smiled like I had made the correct choice. Then she lowered one hand to the paper plate on her lap, and that was when I saw the corner of the index card underneath it. The card was only visible for a second. A white index card, the kind people use for recipes or grocery lists, tucked halfway under Carol's paper plate. If it had been blank, I would not have noticed it at all. But there was writing on it, and the first thing I saw was my full name. Not Mikey, not Mike. My full legal name. I looked away so fast my neck hurt. That was another thing I did wrong. I acted like I had accidentally seen something private, even though the private thing was about me. Carol was watching the grill. Ryan had just flipped a row of burgers, and everyone near the table made the same small, appreciative sound people make when food looks almost ready. For a moment, Carol's attention was not on me, so I looked again. The top line had my name. Under it, in neat blue pen, were 3 short notes. Gray house, corner side, keeps distance, responds better when approached gently. I read that last line twice. It was not information, it was instruction. Before I could move, Carol's hand slid down and covered the card. She did not snatch it away. She did not look embarrassed. She simply placed her palm over it like she was keeping a page from blowing away in the wind. "That's not for now," she said. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Around us, the cookout kept going. Someone laughed too loudly near the cooler. A paper plate fell off the folding table and skidded across the grass. Kelly called for everyone to come closer because she wanted one group photo before the kids got too wet from the sprinkler. That should have been my chance. I could have stood up and said I needed to leave. I could have asked Carol where she got the card. I could have walked straight to Kelly and shown her. Instead, I froze in the space between fear and embarrassment. Because if I stood up too fast, people would look. If I accused an old woman at a backyard cookout, people would remember that more than whatever she had done. Carol turned her head toward me. "You're thinking of an excuse," she said. I felt my face go hot. "No," I said, even though I was. She smiled, not kindly this time, not cruelly either, just knowingly. Kelly waved from beside the grill. "Come on, you two," she called. "Photo." Carol set her lemonade on the grass and reached over. Her fingers closed gently around my wrist. It was not tight. That was the worst part. If she had grabbed me hard, I could have pulled away. I could have made her the strange one. But her hand was light, almost grandmotherly. Anyone watching would have seen an elderly woman steadying herself or asking someone to help her stand. "Stay," Carol said. "They wanted you in this one." I looked at her hand on my wrist, then at her face. "Who's they?" I asked. Carol's eyes moved past me toward the fence line behind the chairs. She did not answer. Kelly called again, still smiling, still holding her phone up. I shifted in my seat and the back of the folding chair scraped against something. A small strip of tape. I twisted just enough to see behind me. There was a piece of beige masking tape stuck across the upper bar of the chair. My name was written on it in black marker. For a few seconds, I could not make my body move. My name on the tape looked worse than the card. The card could have been hidden. The card could have been something Carol brought with her. But the tape was on the chair before I sat down. Someone had prepared that chair. Someone had decided where I would be before Kelly ever touched my elbow and asked me to sit with Carol. It was not a spare chair. It had been assigned. Kelly was still smiling from near the grill phone raised. Ryan stood beside her with a spatula in one hand, trying to get everyone into the frame. Nobody looked alarmed. Nobody looked like they understood that anything was happening beside the fence. That almost made it harder to stand up. I slid my wrist out of Carol's hand. She let me go. That scared me more than if she had tightened her grip. "I'm sorry," I said, already reaching for my pocket. "I have to take this." My phone had not buzzed. There was no call. But I looked at the screen anyway, frowning like I had just seen something urgent. It was the kind of lie people accept because it makes everyone comfortable. A work call, a family call, a reason. Something better than saying an old woman at a cookout had a card about me and my name taped to a chair. Carol watched me stand. "You always do better with an excuse," she said. She said it quietly, but I heard every word. I walked toward the driveway instead of the house. I did not look back at the chair. I did not look at Kelly. I held the dead phone to my ear and nodded once, like someone was talking to me. No one stopped me. That was another part that bothered me later. If I had really been expected in the photo, someone should have called me back. Kelly should have said, "Wait 1 second." Ryan should have asked where I was going, but the group gathered without me. The laughter continued. The grill lid closed. By the time I reached my front door, my hands were shaking badly enough that I dropped my keys. I got inside, locked the door, and stood in the entryway with my phone still pressed against my ear. Only then did I lower it. I texted Kelly. Who was Carol? 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Kelly replied, "What do you mean?" I typed with both thumbs. "The older woman by the fence. She knew things about me." Kelly did not answer right away. Through my front window, I could see the glow of string lights in her backyard. People were still moving around. Normal shadows, normal voices. A burst of laughter rose over the fence and faded. Then my phone buzzed. Kelly wrote, "I thought she came with you." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. A second text came through. Ryan thought she was from the Miller's side. I looked back toward the glow over the fence. Carol was gone. The chair I had been sitting in was folded and leaning against the fence by itself. The strip of tape was still on the back. I did not sleep well that night. Nothing happened after I left the cookout. No knock at my door. No strange message from Kelly. No sign of Carol crossing the yard or standing under the streetlight. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was making coffee. It was the neighborhood group chat. Kelly had posted a handful of photos from the cookout. Burgers on the grill, kids near the sprinkler, Ryan holding up a paper plate like he was making a toast. Ordinary pictures, the kind people post so everyone can pretend the evening was warmer and friendlier than it actually felt. I almost closed the chat. Then I saw the last photo. It was slightly blurry, taken from near the folding table. Most of the frame showed people laughing around the grill, but at the far edge near the fence was the chair I had been sitting in. Empty, folded open, facing the group like someone was supposed to be there. The strip of masking tape was still on the back. I zoomed in with 2 fingers. My name was gone. Written on the tape instead was another name, Daniel Harlow. I did not know anyone named Daniel Harlow. At first I thought maybe it was one of the neighbors, someone I had not met yet. Then I searched my email because the name bothered me. I had saved the old rental paperwork from when I moved in, including the forwarding notice the landlord had accidentally left in the kitchen drawer. Daniel Harlow had lived in my house before me. He moved out 8 months before I arrived. Kelly had told me once that the place had been empty for a while because the landlord was fixing water damage. She had said the previous tenant was quiet and kept to himself. I typed into the group chat before I could talk myself out of it. Who was the older woman sitting near the fence? No one answered. The typing dots appeared under Kelly's name, then stopped. A minute later, all the cookout photos disappeared from the chat. Kelly sent one message after that. Sorry, uploaded the wrong batch. No corrected batch ever came. I kept looking at the empty chair and the screenshot I had taken before the photos vanished. That was the part I could not stop thinking about. Not Carol, not the tape, the empty space where I had been polite enough to sit, and the name of someone who had apparently sat there before me. The first thing Evan said was, "I'm sorry, I know it's late." That was how he got me to open the door. Not because he sounded scared, not because he sounded angry, because he sounded embarrassed. Like he was already apologizing for being the kind of neighbor nobody wants to be. It was a little after 10 on a Tuesday night. I was in sweatpants standing in my kitchen with the lights low and a glass of water beside the sink, already thinking about bed. The duplex was quiet, except for the refrigerator humming and the faint sound of traffic from the main road 2 blocks away. Evan lived in the other half of the duplex. We shared a driveway. That sounds like a small detail, but shared driveways turn small favors into obligations. If one person parks wrong, both people feel it. If one person needs access, the other person has to cooperate. You learn quickly that being difficult about parking can poison an entire living situation. So when Evan knocked, I answered. I kept the chain on at first, not because I was afraid of him. I barely knew him, but he had always seemed normal, mid-40s maybe, quiet, usually waved when he got home from work. Once he brought my trash bin up from the curb when I forgot it before a windy night. He stood under the porch light, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans phone, in one hand, his face tight with stress. "Sorry," he said again. "There's some kind of leak out back. I got an emergency guy here, but your car's blocking the side access." I looked past him. At the curb, a white van idled with one headlight out. It did not have a company logo. That was the first thing I noticed, but not the first thing I let myself believe mattered. Evan saw me looking and gave a tired little laugh. "I know," he said. "Looks sketchy, but it's late night plumbing. They all look like that." That almost made me feel guilty for noticing. He shifted his weight and held up his phone like proof. "I hate to ask this late," he said, "but could you move your car for 10 minutes, just so he can get equipment through?" I wanted to say no. Not a hard no, not even a suspicious no. Just the tired kind of no people deserve to say at 10 at night in their own home. But then I pictured water spreading behind the duplex. I pictured him telling the landlord I had refused to move my car during an emergency. I pictured the next 6 months of passing him in the driveway after that. So I said, "Yeah, give me a second." The relief on his face looked real. That is the part I still come back to. If he was lying, he was good at it. If he was not lying, then something had already pulled him into it before he knocked on my door. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. The air was cool and dry, no rain, no storm, nothing dramatic. The porch light buzzed above us, and the white van sat at the curb with its engine running low. A man stood beside the driver's door, half in the shadow between the van and the streetlight. He wore dark work pants and a reflective vest over a black hoodie. There was a rectangular patch on the vest where a company name should have been. The fabric there was darker and sticky looking, like a logo had been peeled off. I moved my car forward and angled it toward the curb to clear the driveway. The man from the van lifted one hand. "Appreciate it," he said. "Evan said you'd be reasonable." I paused with my car door still open. Reasonable. It was a normal word. A friendly word almost, but it landed wrong, like a label had already been placed on me, like I had been sorted into the kind of person who would rather cooperate than ask too many questions. Evan gave me an awkward smile. "Thanks, man," he said. "Seriously." Behind him, the contractor looked down at a clipboard. I could not see much from where I stood, just the top sheet clipped under a small metal bar, but I saw my unit letter near the top. Unit B. Then I saw a line beneath it. Resident prefers no confrontation. I only saw it for a second before the contractor tilted the clipboard against his chest. For a moment, nobody spoke. The van kept idling. The porch light kept buzzing, and I stood in my own driveway holding my keys, trying to decide whether I had just read something impossible or whether my tired brain had turned paperwork into a warning because I already wanted to go back inside. Then Evan pointed toward the side gate. "If you don't mind," he said softer now, "he just needs to check the rear access." I looked at the gate. The motion light above it clicked on before anyone moved toward it. The motion light over the side gate was one of those cheap floodlights that came with the duplex. It clicked on whenever a raccoon crossed the fence line or the neighbor's cat jumped onto the trash bin. Most nights I barely noticed it, but standing there in the driveway with Evan watching me and the contractor holding that clipboard against his chest, the sudden light felt like someone had raised a hand. Nobody had moved toward the gate. Not yet. Evan looked at it too, then back at me. "Sensor's touchy," he said. That was true. I had complained about it once. I had told him the light came on for nothing. I hated that he remembered. The contractor stepped away from the van, finally entering the porch light. Up close, he looked more tired than threatening. Late 30s maybe, stubble, work boots, a reflective vest with that missing rectangle where a company patch should have been. He carried no toolbox, only the clipboard and a phone with a cracked black case. "Rear access is faster," he said. "If we go around your side, we can check the line without tearing anything up." I looked at Evan. "Why my side?" Evan rubbed the back of his neck. "Fence layout," he said. "Mine's blocked with storage stuff. I would move it, but if there's water back there, I don't want to waste time." That sounded weak. It also sounded possible. Duplexes are full of stupid layout problems. Fences meet in awkward places. Gates get installed on the wrong side. One unit's convenience becomes the other unit's inconvenience. I had learned that in the first week. Still, I did not move. The contractor glanced down at his phone. "We have approval," he said. I felt my stomach tighten. "From who?" He looked at Evan like the question surprised him. "From you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sentence was so wrong, my brain rejected it before fear could form. I didn't approve anything I said. Evan frowned. "You texted me." "No, I didn't." He unlocked his phone and turned the screen toward me. There it was, a text thread with my name at the top. The last message was short. "Yeah, that's fine. Use my side. Use my side if you need to." Above it, Evan had written, "Emergency guy says he may need rear access. Is that okay?" The timestamp was 9:48 p.m. At 9:48, I had been in the shower. My phone had been on the kitchen counter. I pulled it out with hands that suddenly felt too large and clumsy. I opened my messages. I found Evan's name. There was no text from him, no message sent, no deleted thread that I could see, nothing. Evan stared at my screen, then back at his. For the first time, his stress looked different, less annoyed, more confused. "That's your number," he said. It was. The contractor did not look confused. He looked impatient. "Look," he said softer, "now we're not trying to make this difficult. You already said yes. We just need the gate code." There it was. The favor had changed again. First it was move your car. Then it was check rear access. Now it was give a stranger the code to my side gate, because a phone I had not touched had apparently given permission for me. I looked at the gate. The motion light stayed on. Under it, the latch looked wrong. Not broken, not open, just slightly lifted from the wood, the way it looked when someone pulled against the lock too hard and the screws shifted a fraction. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. There were fresh scratches around the keypad cover, thin silver lines in the black metal. Near the latch on the inside edge of the gate was a smear of wet mud. That made no sense. It had not rained in days. The driveway was dry. The yard behind the gate was mostly gravel and dead leaves. A tiny strip of black rubber clung to one screw head, like a torn piece from a glove. I took a picture. The contractor saw me do it. His face did not change, but his voice did. "Sir," he said, "we're already billing for the visit." Evan looked from him to me. "Can we not make this a whole thing?" he asked. That sentence did more to scare me than the scratches. Not because it was threatening, because it was exactly the kind of sentence that makes reasonable people swallow their own discomfort. A whole thing. Nobody wants to make a whole thing. I put my phone back in my pocket and took one step away from the gate. "I'm calling the landlord first," I said. Evan closed his eyes for half a second. The contractor looked down at the clipboard again. Then he said almost casually, "It says you might say that." For a second I thought I had misheard him. The contractor did not repeat it. He just stood there with the clipboard angled against his chest, one thumb pressed over the paper like he had covered something by accident and then decided to keep it covered. I looked at Evan. He looked at the contractor. Neither of them said anything. That silence told me more than either of them could have. "What does that mean?" I asked. The contractor gave a small professional smile, not friendly, not rude. The kind of smile people use when they want you to feel like you are slowing down a process everyone else already understands. "It means residents usually want landlord confirmation," he said. "That's normal." "Usually?" "Residents, not you." He had changed the sentence just enough to make it sound ordinary again. I almost let him. That was the worst part. My brain wanted the normal version. It wanted to believe he had simply meant that people often ask landlords before giving access. A reasonable policy, a standard note, nothing personal. Then I remembered the line on the clipboard. "Resident prefers no confrontation." I remembered the fake text on Evan's phone. I remembered the scratches around my gate lock. I kept my voice as flat as I could. "This is a rental," I said. "I'm not giving anyone access without the landlord approving it." Evan stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough that the driveway felt smaller. "Come on," he said. "It's just the side yard." That was another phrase people use when they want your boundary to sound dramatic. Just the side yard. Just 10 minutes. Just access. The contractor checked his phone. "If we can't get in tonight, the visit still bills," he said. I looked at him. "To who?" He did not answer right away. Evan said, "Let's not get into all that right now." But I did want to get into it then. I wanted every detail suddenly. Company name, license, work order, phone number. I wanted the world to become paperwork in my favor for once. "What company did you say?" I asked. The contractor said Metro Emergency Plumbing. I asked for a business card. He patted his vest pocket, then the back pocket of his pants too slowly. "Van's got them," he said. He did not go get one. The van kept idling at the curb. One headlight threw a weak cone across the edge of the lawn. The other side of the front end was dark, making the whole vehicle look half asleep. From the side gate, the motion light clicked off. We all looked at it. A moment later, it clicked back on. This time, there was a sound with it, a small metal tap. Not from the wind, from the latch. Evan whispered, "What was that?" The contractor did not turn his head. That is what made my skin go cold. He kept looking at me. I backed away from both of them and pulled out my phone. "I'm calling him now," I said. Evan's face changed then. Not anger exactly. More like panic trying to become annoyance before anyone noticed. "Man, seriously?" "Yes." I walked toward my front door without waiting for permission. That sounds obvious. It should have been obvious. But even then, some part of me felt like I was being rude by leaving them standing in my driveway. The contractor called after me. "Use the number on the work order." I stopped with one foot on the porch step. "What?" "For the landlord," he said. "Use the number on the work order." "I have my landlord's number?" His smile did not move. "I know." I went inside and locked the door behind me. Then I locked the deadbolt, then the chain. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone before I found my landlord's contact. He answered on the third ring, groggy and annoyed, until I said emergency plumbing. Then he got quiet. "I didn't call a plumber," he said. I looked through the narrow window beside the door. Evan stood near the driveway, phone pressed to his ear now. The contractor had moved closer to the gate. "You don't have a leak report?" I asked. "Number from who?" "Evan says there's a leak out back." My landlord exhaled. "There's no shared rear line on your side. Your gate should not be open for anyone." As he said that, the motion light over the side gate went dark. Then it came on again. This time the latch lifted, only a fraction, but I saw it move. The landlord was still talking when I lowered the phone from my ear and opened the camera app. Through the window I recorded the gate. The latch moved again. A careful test. Up, down. Like whoever was on the other side was trying to find out how much pressure it would take before the lock gave. I told my landlord to stay on the line. Then I called 911 from my other phone. The dispatcher asked if anyone was inside the property. I said no. Then I corrected myself. I don't know. That was the honest answer. I was inside. Evan was in the driveway. The contractor was near the side gate. But the latch had moved from the backyard side, or at least that was how it looked from the window. I could not explain that without sounding confused, and I was suddenly very aware that confusion makes people take you less seriously. So I gave the cleanest version. A man claiming to be a contractor was trying to access my side gate. There was no landlord approval. My neighbor had shown me a text from my number that I did not send. The gate looked damaged. Someone was testing the latch. The dispatcher told me to stay inside. I did. I kept recording through the narrow window beside the door. The video was terrible. Mostly porch reflection darkness and the white edge of the driveway. But the motion light over the gate stayed on and the latch moved once more while I was filming. Then everything outside became still. Evan turned toward the contractor and said something I could not hear. The contractor looked back at the van. For the first time that night, he seemed annoyed. Not afraid, not caught, just inconvenienced. He tapped the clipboard against his thigh twice. Then he walked to the van. "Wait," Evan called her. The natives mauled after him. The contractor did not wait. He got in, shut the door, and the van rolled away from the curb with only one headlight cutting across the front lawn. No rush, no squealing tires, nothing dramatic. He left like a man whose job had been delayed, not stopped. That made it feel less like a crime. That made it worse. Evan stood in the driveway for a few seconds after the van disappeared. Then he looked toward my door. I did not open it. He came up onto the porch and knocked once. "Hey," he said, "can we talk?" I stayed silent. He lowered his voice. "I think there's been some kind of mix-up." That phrase almost worked on me. Some kind of mix-up. It was soft, forgiving. It left room for everyone to be embarrassed and move on. It made the fake text the gate scratches the clipboard, all of it feel like something that might become smaller if I agreed to call it a misunderstanding. I did not answer. The landlord was still on my other phone. I had him on speaker now, sitting on the table beside the door. He heard Evan knock. He heard him ask to talk. "Do not open that door," my landlord said. So I didn't. Evan waited another few seconds, then stepped back off the porch. By the time the police arrived, the van was gone. 2 officers walked the driveway with flashlights. Evan came outside again and talked to them with his hands in the pocket of his hoodie, shoulders hunched against the cold. He did not look like a man caught doing something. He looked like a tired neighbor, stuck in a stupid dispute. I heard pieces through the door. Leak. Emergency call. Miscommunication. Thought he approved it. When one officer came to my door, I showed him the video of the latch moving. I showed him the scratches around the keypad and the strip of black rubber caught on the screw. I showed him my phone with no text sent to Evan. Then Evan showed them his. The message was still there. "From my number? Yeah, that's fine. Use my site if you need to." The officer looked at my phone again, then at Evan's. His face did not change, but I could tell the situation had moved into that awful gray area where proof exists on both sides and neither one explains the other. Evan kept saying I thought he said yes. He sounded sincere enough that I hated him for it. The officers took photos. They wrote down the van description. I gave them what I could remember about the contractor. Dark hoodie, reflective vest, missing company patch, one headlight out, clipboard. The landlord arrived 20 minutes later in pajama pants and a jacket thrown over a t-shirt. He looked angry in a way that made me feel safer. He checked the side gate himself. The lock had not failed, but the frame had shifted around the latch. Fresh marks showed where something thin had been worked between the gate and the post. "This wasn't plumbing," he said. One officer asked Evan who had called the contractor. Evan said he had received a call from the emergency service saying they were responding to the rear line issue. The officer asked who reported the issue. Evan looked at me. Then he looked at the landlord. "They said Unit B did. Unit B was mine." My landlord went quiet. He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, and said, "I got a voicemail too." I stared at him. "What voicemail?" He looked uncomfortable before he played it. The audio was short, maybe 8 seconds. There was static in the background, then a voice that sounded enough like mine to make my stomach turn. "Let them through," the voice said. "I don't want to make things difficult." Nobody spoke after it ended, not right away. The officer asked if I had left that message. I said no, but my voice did not sound strong when I said it, because the thing in the voicemail had not sounded exactly like me. It sounded like someone imitating the part of me they had already written down. The part that did not want to make a whole thing. The police did not arrest Evan. I need to say that because people expect stories like this to end with someone being taken away. They expect the van to be found 2 streets over. They expect the fake contractor to have a record, or the neighbor to break down and admit he knew more than he said. None of that happened. Evan kept insisting he thought I had approved it. He showed the text again and again, like the message had become a shield he could stand behind. I believed he was scared by then. I also believed he was hiding something. Both things can be true. The officers took the voicemail from my landlord's phone. They had him email the file to himself and to the report number. They took pictures of the side gate. They wrote down the time the van left and the time the call came in. Then one of them said what I already knew they were going to say. There's not much more we can do tonight. That sentence has a way of making danger feel administrative. My landlord stayed for another half hour after they left. He changed the side gate code while I stood in the kitchen and watched through the window. He added a temporary padlock, then told me he would send someone in the morning to reinforce the frame. He was angry, genuinely angry. That helped. But even he kept replaying the voicemail. Could be spoofed, he said. Could be AI. Could be somebody got a sample of your voice. I asked him from where. He looked at me like he had no good answer. I thought about every normal thing that had my voice on it. Work calls, voicemail greetings, old videos and group chats, a clip from a birthday dinner someone posted years ago. The idea that someone could take the part of me that sounded polite and use it to open my own gate made me feel sick in a way the scratches never had. Evan did not knock again that night. The next morning, his car was gone before sunrise. The white van never came back. By noon, the repair guy my landlord actually hired had fixed the side gate frame and installed a new lock. He wore a company shirt. His van had a logo. He gave me a paper receipt without being asked. All the normal proof I had not known I needed the night before. I started to feel foolish in daylight. That always happens. Fear looks different with sunlight on it. The driveway was just a driveway again. The gate was just a gate. Evan's side of the duplex was quiet. A jogger went by with earbuds in. A delivery truck dropped off a package across the street. Everything looked too normal to support what I remembered. Then I checked the mailbox. There was an invoice inside. No envelope, no stamp, just a folded sheet of paper placed behind the electric bill and a grocery flyer. At the top in plain black type it said, Metro Emergency Plumbing. No address, no phone number, no license number. Below that, emergency rear access completed. Service location. Interior side yard / Unit B access. Approved by my full name. I stood at the mailbox with the paper in my hand, reading the same lines until they stopped looking like English. At the bottom under service notes was one more line. Resident response hesitant but cooperative. I do not remember walking back inside. I remember locking the door. I remember setting the invoice on the kitchen counter and taking pictures from 3 different angles because some part of me had already learned that proof could disappear or turn against me if I was not fast enough. Then my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the doorbell camera. The timestamp was 2:13 a.m. I opened it. The clip showed my porch in grainy black and white. The porch light came on first. Then the mailbox lid lifted slowly at the edge of the frame. No person stepped into view. No hand appeared. The angle was bad. I know that. It could have been someone standing just outside the camera's range. It probably was. I have told myself that for years. But the part I cannot explain is the audio. There was a soft scrape of metal from the mailbox. Then a voice whispered close to the microphone. Not loud, not clear, but close enough. See, that wasn't so hard. I moved out 3 weeks later. The landlord let me break the lease after the police report. Evan was gone by then, too. Management said he had terminated early because of family circumstances. I never found out where he went, or whether he had been used the same way I had, or whether he had simply been better at sounding confused. The case went nowhere. The voicemail was inconclusive. The number was spoofed. The company did not exist in the state business registry. The van plate the part Evan thought he remembered came back to nothing. But I kept the invoice, not because it proved what happened, because of that last line. Hesitant but cooperative. I never gave them permission. But by morning there were 3 different records saying I had. The first note was so polite that I felt guilty before I felt annoyed. It was taped to my apartment door when I got home from work on a Monday evening. A small square of notebook paper folded once with my unit number written neatly on the outside. Inside it said, "Hey, sorry to bother you. Could you maybe walk a little softer after 10? I'm a light sleeper. Thank you." There was a tiny smiley face at the end. That smiley face worked on me. If the note had been rude, I could have been defensive. If it had accused me of stomping or partying or being inconsiderate, I probably would have rolled my eyes and ignored it, but it was careful, almost embarrassed. Whoever wrote it had gone out of their way to make the complaint gentle, so I felt like the bad guy. I lived in the upstairs unit of an older 2-story apartment building, the kind with thin walls, tired carpet in the hallway, and floors that complained even when you stepped lightly. I knew sound carried. I had heard the man beside me sneeze through the wall more than once. I had heard someone downstairs run a blender every morning at 7, so the note was not impossible. I did not think I was loud, but nobody thinks they are loud. That night, I took my shoes off at the door. I closed kitchen cabinets with 2 hands. I set my phone on the table instead of dropping it. After 10, I walked like someone was sleeping in the same room, even though I lived alone. The next morning, there was another note. This one was slipped halfway under my door. Thanks for trying. Last night was better, but there was still dragging around 12:30. Sorry to keep asking. Dragging. That word bothered me. I had not dragged anything. I had watched TV on my couch until 11, brushed my teeth and gone to bed. No furniture, no boxes, nothing across the floor. Still, I found myself looking around the apartment for an explanation. Maybe the dining chair scraped when I stood up. Maybe the old floor made normal footsteps sound worse underneath. Maybe the building turned small noises into bigger ones by the time they reached the lower unit. I wrote back on the bottom of the note, "So sorry, I'll be more careful. I'll be more careful." I slid it under the door of the apartment below mine after work. Unit 1A. The name on the mailbox was Lena Marsh. She texted me later that evening. "Thank you for being kind about it." That message made it harder to defend myself. For the next few nights, I became ridiculous about noise. I bought a cheap rug for the hallway. I put felt pads under my chair legs. I stopped using the garbage disposal after dinner. I even started brushing my teeth earlier because the bathroom floor creaked near the sink. And still the notes kept coming. Wednesday morning. "I'm sorry. Last night was rough again." Thursday. "Could you not move things after midnight?" Friday. "Please, I just need one quiet night." By then, I was no longer annoyed. I was anxious. Every step inside my own apartment felt like a choice someone else could hear. I would stop in the hallway and wonder if Lena was lying awake under me, staring at her ceiling waiting for the next sound. I started planning my evenings around a woman I barely knew because she kept apologizing while making me feel responsible for ruining her sleep. That was the trick. It is hard to defend yourself against someone who keeps apologizing for accusing you. On Friday night, I did not watch TV. I did not cook. I did not move the dining chair. I came home, ate a sandwich standing at the kitchen counter, showered before 9, and got into bed at 10:15. I remember lying there in the dark, proud of how quiet the apartment was. The whole place felt still. No footsteps, no pipes, no creaking floor. For the first time that week, I thought maybe Lena would finally get her quiet night. The next morning, there was a new note under my door. Only one sentence. "Please stop saying sorry if you're going to keep doing it." I stood in the hallway for a long time with that note in my hand. "Please stop saying sorry if you're going to keep doing it." The sentence made me feel exposed in a way the earlier notes had not. Before that, Lena sounded tired. Frustrated maybe, but still polite. This note felt different. Not angry exactly. Hurt, like I had been pretending to care while secretly doing the same thing every night. I almost went downstairs right then. I wanted to explain myself. I wanted to tell her I had been trying. I wanted to say I had not dragged anything, not once, and that I was starting to feel crazy, walking around my own apartment, like every floorboard was wired to punish me. But it was barely 7 in the morning, so I texted instead. "I'm sorry. I really don't know what you're hearing. I was in bed by 10:15 last night and didn't move around after that." She did not answer until almost noon. When she did, the message was short. It started at 11:40. I stared at the time. 11:40 did not sound right. I opened my calendar, then my photos, then my bank app, looking for proof of something I already knew. Tuesday night, the night she kept mentioning in later messages I had not been home. I had driven to my sister's place 40 minutes away because she needed help after a minor surgery. I slept on her couch. I had a gas receipt from 9:12 p.m. near her town, and a photo she had taken of her dog sleeping on my legs after midnight. I sent Lena a careful message. "I don't want this to sound dismissive, but I wasn't home Tuesday night. I stayed with my sister." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then Lena wrote, "I know what I heard." That was the first time I felt something colder than guilt. Not fear yet, just the sense that the rules had shifted, and I had missed the moment it happened. A minute later, she sent another message. I recorded it because I thought maybe I was losing it. Then an audio file appeared, 7 seconds long. I did not play it right away. I sat at my kitchen table with my thumb over the little triangle, embarrassed by how nervous I felt. It was only a recording from a downstairs neighbor. Maybe it would prove she was hearing pipes. Maybe it would prove someone else in the building was making noise. Maybe this whole thing could still become a maintenance issue instead of whatever it was becoming in my head. I pressed play. At first, there was only room tone, that low, flat silence phones record in dark rooms. Then came a slow, dragging sound. Wood against wood. Not loud. Worse than loud. Deliberate. After that, 3 footsteps crossed the ceiling above her. Slow. Heavy. Too heavy to be mine, but on the recording they came from directly overhead. Then there was a pause long enough for me to think the file had ended. A voice whispered very close to the microphone. "Sorry, I'll stop." I dropped the phone onto the table. The voice was mine. Not perfectly. There was something thin about it, like it had been played through a wall and recorded again. But it was close enough that my body recognized it before my mind could argue. I played it again. Dragging. 3 steps. Silence. "Sorry, I'll stop." I had never said that to Lena out loud. I had written sorry in a text. I had written it on the bottom of a note, but I had never stood in her apartment or outside her door or anywhere near her phone and said those words. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. That isn't me. I wasn't there. Where did you get this? Every version sounded defensive. Every version sounded like exactly what a guilty upstairs neighbor would say after being caught. Lena texted again before I sent anything. "Could you come down tonight and hear it from my side?" Then another message. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I just need you to understand." That was what made it hard. She did not accuse me. She made me responsible for understanding her. I looked around my apartment. The cheap rug in the hallway, the felt pads under the chairs, the cabinets I had started closing like they belonged to someone else. I had changed my whole routine for a sound I was beginning to believe did not come from me. And still, when I read Lena's message, I felt guilty. I told her I could come down after work. She replied almost immediately, "Thank you." Then a few seconds later, "Please don't say sorry when you get here. It makes it worse." I almost canceled 3 times before I went downstairs. The first time was in my car after work. I sat in the parking lot with the engine off, looking up at the building, and thought about texting Lena that something had come up. The second time was at my own front door, keys still in my hand. The third was after I changed out of my work clothes and heard my own floor creak under my sock. Each time I imagined how it would sound. "Sorry I can't come, listen to the noise you think I'm making." There was no version of that sentence that did not make me sound like the problem. So at 7:30 I went downstairs. Lena opened the door before I knocked twice. She was smaller than I expected. Early 40s maybe, with tired eyes and a gray sweater pulled over one hand, like she had been holding the sleeve for comfort. She did not look angry. That made it harder. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded and stepped inside. Her apartment was normal. That was what I noticed first. I think I had expected something to be wrong in an obvious way. Trash everywhere covered windows, strange smell, something that would let me decide quickly that this was about her and not me. But the place was clean. A couch with a folded blanket over the arm, a small lamp on the end table, a mug of tea gone cold on the coffee table, a half-finished crossword puzzle beside it. It looked like a place where someone had been trying to stay calm. Then I looked up. Pieces of blue painter's tape were stuck to the ceiling in 6 or 7 places. Small strips each with a time written on it in black marker. 11:40, 12:18, 1:03, 2:22. Some had short notes under the times. Dragging, 3 steps, voice, chair. I stared too long. Lena followed my eyes. "I started marking where it happens," she said. "So, maintenance would stop telling me it's the pipes." I did not know what to say. The tape made her seem more reasonable and less reasonable at the same time. It was organized, patient, something a person did after nobody believed them for long enough. "I'm not trying to make this weird," she said. That was usually what people said when the weird part had already started. She gestured toward the couch. I sat on the edge because standing felt confrontational. She sat in the chair across from me, close to the coffee table. Her phone was there, face up with the voice memo app open. I did not like that. "I just need you to hear what I hear," she said, "from down here." I looked at the ceiling again. Directly above us would have been my living room. A few feet to the left was my hallway. I knew because I had walked those boards enough times now to know which ones complained under pressure. Then I saw the paper on the coffee table. It was half under the crossword book, but enough showed for me to recognize the shape of my apartment. A hand-drawn layout. Not exact like a blueprint, but close enough. Kitchen by the front door, hallway, bathroom, bedroom, living room. Even the little square where my cheap rug sat was marked in pencil. There were arrows drawn between rooms, kitchen to hallway, hallway to bedroom, bedroom to bathroom. One line had a note beside it. He pauses here before answering. My mouth went dry. I leaned forward before I could stop myself. Near the bedroom area, another note was circled twice. Apologizes when asked gently. Lena noticed me reading. She did not move to hide it. That was worse than if she had. How do you know my layout? I asked. She looked at the ceiling. I hear where you are. That answer did not explain anything. It only moved the wrongness deeper. I stood up. I think I should talk to the landlord, I said. Lena's face changed just slightly. Fear crossed it, but not fear of me. Fear of the landlord. Fear of not being believed again. Please don't leave yet, she said. It usually starts after you try to prove it isn't you. I should have gone anyway. Instead, I stayed because she sounded exhausted. Because she had made tea and marked times and opened her door like someone who had been waiting for help, not someone setting a trap. Because even then, some stupid part of me still wanted to be fair. Above us, the ceiling creaked. One slow step, then another, then a third. Lena closed her eyes. See, she whispered. I looked up at the painter's tape marked 11:40. The sound moved across the ceiling from the place where my kitchen would have been, toward the hallway. But I was downstairs, and my apartment above us was locked. For a few seconds, I did not move. I think part of me expected the sound to stop once I noticed it. Like catching it would make it embarrassed. Like it would become pipes or settling wood, or the refrigerator upstairs shifting in a way refrigerators do not shift. It did not stop. The footsteps crossed over Lena's ceiling in a slow line. Kitchen, hallway, living room. I knew the path because it was my path. The same route I took every night, from the sink to the couch, from the couch to the bathroom, from the bathroom to the bedroom. Hearing it from below felt wrong, in a way I still have trouble explaining. It was not only that someone was above us, it was that whoever was above us knew how I moved when I thought nobody was paying attention. Lena sat very still. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers pressed so tightly together that the knuckles had gone pale. She did not look surprised. She looked tired, like this was not the first time she had watched someone else understand too late. I whispered, "No one is up there." She looked at me. "You always say that first." The footsteps stopped directly over us. For 1 second, there was no sound at all. Then my phone started ringing upstairs. Not buzzing in my pocket, ringing above us. I looked down at my empty hands. My phone had been in my jacket pocket when I came downstairs. I remembered feeling it there. I remembered checking the time in the hallway before knocking on Lena's door. But now the sound came from overhead, muffled by the floorboards. The ringtone echoed faintly through the ceiling. Lena did not look up. "It usually starts after you try to prove it," she said. I backed away from the couch. "No," I said. The ringing stopped. Immediately after, something dragged across the floor above us. Slow, heavy, from the living room toward the bedroom. I knew there was nothing in that part of my apartment heavy enough to make that sound. My couch was against the wall. My table was light. I had no boxes left. No storage trunk, nothing that could be pulled across the floorboards like that. Lena reached for her phone on the coffee table. The voice memo app was already open. "Don't," I said. She looked at me, and for the first time there was something almost angry in her face. "I need proof," she said. She tapped record. The dragging stopped. 3 footsteps came back toward the center of the room. Then a voice spoke above us. Not loud, not shouted. It came through the ceiling like someone standing barefoot in my apartment and leaning toward the floor. "Sorry," it said. My own voice. "I'll stop." Lena closed her eyes. A tear ran down one side of her face, but she did not wipe it away. "See," she whispered. I could not answer her. Because hearing your own voice from a place where you are not standing does not make you scream. Not right away. It empties you first. It makes you feel like someone has reached into the private part of your life, found the words you use when you want trouble to end, and taught them to something else. Above us, the floor creaked once more. A single step, then silence. I turned and walked to the door. Lena stood too. "Please don't leave," she said. "It gets worse when you leave before it's done." That sentence should have made me run. Instead, I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Even then, even after hearing my own voice through the ceiling, I hesitated because she sounded afraid. Because some part of me still felt responsible for the sound torturing her, even if it could not possibly be me. That was how deep the guilt had gotten. Then Lena said very softly, "You're going to apologize again." I opened the door and went out into the hallway. I did not run up the stairs. I wanted to. I wanted to take the steps 2 at a time, and throw my own door open. But the building was quiet, and there were other tenants, and I still had the insane thought that I should not make noise. I climbed as carefully as I could. That is the part I hate most. I was terrified, and I still tried to be a considerate upstairs neighbor. My apartment door was locked. The deadbolt was in place. I unlocked it and stepped inside with my keys between my fingers. The lights were off exactly as I had left them. The hallway rug was flat. The kitchen was empty. The living room furniture had not moved. No one was there. Then I saw my phone. It was lying in the middle of the kitchen floor, face up, screen dark. I picked it up slowly. There were no missed calls, no new recordings, no sign it had rung at all. But under it, pressed into the dust on the floor, were 3 long drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled across the kitchen, and stopped exactly where my phone was waiting. I called the landlord from the kitchen floor. I did not sit down on purpose. I think my legs just gave up while I was staring at the drag marks under my phone. The apartment around me was silent, not peaceful, silent in the way a room gets after someone has finished doing something and left before you arrive. My landlord answered on the second call. I told him someone had been in my unit. Then I looked at the locked door, the closed windows, the deadbolt, and the phone in my hand, and I heard how that sounded. He asked if the lock was damaged. I said no. He asked if anything was missing. I said no. He asked if I wanted him to call police. I said I did not know. That was the honest answer again. I wanted help, but I did not know what kind of help applied to a noise complaint that had learned my voice. He came over anyway. While I waited, I did not move from the kitchen. I kept looking at the 3 drag marks in the dust. They were not deep. They would not have convinced anyone who did not already believe me. Just 3 pale lines across a floor. I suddenly regretted not cleaning better. Lena did not text. She did not knock. No new note appeared under my door. That should have helped. It did not. When my landlord arrived, he checked the door first, then the windows. He looked at the lock, the frame, the bathroom vent, the bedroom closet. Everything a normal person checks when they are trying to turn fear into a maintenance problem. He found nothing. Then he saw the drag marks. What made these, he asked. I don't know. He looked at my phone in my hand. I did not tell him where it had been at first. I was afraid of the way his face would change. But eventually I told him everything. The notes, the audio, going downstairs, the ceiling, my voice, the phone on the floor. He listened longer than I expected. Then he asked, was this Lena in one and I said yes. He rubbed his face with one hand and looked toward the floor like he was suddenly very tired. She's reported noise from the upstairs unit before he said. I asked what that meant. He did not answer right away. Previous tenants, he said. 3 of them, I think. Maybe 4 if you count the guy who only stayed 2 months. I felt something in me sink. She said the same thing. Not exactly, but close. Footsteps, dragging, talking after midnight. Talking. He nodded. Said she could hear them apologizing through the floor. I stared at him. He looked uncomfortable then, like he had said more than he meant to. Why didn't anyone tell me, I asked? He gave the answer landlords give when there is no good answer. Nobody filed anything formal. That sentence made me think of every note Lena had written, every apology, every careful phrase, every message that made me want to fix the problem quietly instead of making a record. She complains, then apologizes. Nobody files anything formal. That was why it kept working. The landlord offered to let me switch units if one opened. I told him I wanted out. He did not argue as much as I expected. Maybe the police report from the gate scratches would have helped in another story. In this one, all I had were notes, an audio file, and a voice that sounded too much like mine. I moved out 3 weeks later. Lena never spoke to me again. That was almost the worst part. She passed me once by the mailboxes and looked down like we were 2 people who had survived the same embarrassing conversation and agreed not to mention it. She did not look guilty. She did not look satisfied. She looked tired. On my last day, the apartment was empty. No couch, no rug, no dining chair, no bed frame, nothing left to drag. The movers had gone and I stayed behind for the walkthrough because the landlord was running late. I stood in the middle of the living room and listened to the building. For the first time since the note started, I could hear how quiet it really was. Then there were 3 knocks from under the floor. Not above, below, slow, patient. I did not move. My phone buzzed in my hand. A voice memo had come through from a number I did not recognize. 7 seconds long. I should have deleted it. I played it. At first, there was only the sound of an empty room, a faint hum, a soft floor creak. Then something dragged once across wood. After that came my voice. Sorry, I'll stop. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice whispered close to the microphone. Good. I left before the landlord arrived. I signed the final paperwork by email from my car in a grocery store parking lot. For months after that, I could not apologize without hearing the recording in my head. At work, in stores, in traffic, anywhere. Every small sorry felt like giving something away. I used to think apologizing was how you ended a problem. That apartment taught me some people hear an apology as a door opening. The first message said no pressure at all. That should have been the warning. I had lived in Briar Hollow for 23 days when Marcy added me to the neighborhood group chat. Briar Hollow was the first house I had ever owned, which made every small interaction feel heavier than it should have. When you rent, bad neighbors are something you survive until the lease ends. When you buy, you start thinking in years. You start caring what people think when you forget trash day or let your grass grow too high. So I tried to be the right kind of new homeowner. I waved from the driveway. I learned which bins went out on which mornings. I joined the Choe portal even though the password reset link took 3 tries. I smiled at people whose names I forgot 2 seconds after they told me. I told myself that was normal. Everyone was awkward for the first month. The weekend before it happened, a windstorm came through hard enough to knock branches into the street and flip 2 patio umbrellas into someone's side yard. Nothing catastrophic, no roofs missing, no trees through windows. Just enough damage to make the neighborhood feel useful. By Sunday evening, the group chat was busy. Marcy was the one organizing everything. I had met her once by the mailboxes. Late 50s, short haircut, bright running shoes, the kind of woman who knew which houses needed help before they asked. In the chat, she wrote in complete sentences with cheerful punctuation. Everyone okay after the wind? Then, Paul has a chainsaw if anyone needs branches cut smaller. Then, Dana has extra ice if anyone lost fridge power. People responded with thumbs up and little updates. Fence panel down, patio chair missing. Power flickered but came back. It was neighborly in the most ordinary way. I watched the messages without writing anything. Then Marcy tagged me. Welcome again, by the way. No pressure at all, but we're doing quick welfare checks tonight on a few homes near the undeveloped end. Since you're new, you might actually be helpful. I stared at the message longer than I should have. No pressure at all, but everyone in the group could see it. That is the thing about public politeness. It gives you the shape of a choice, but not the privacy to make it honestly. Before I could answer, Dana replied with a red heart. Paul wrote, "Good idea. New faces sometimes work better." That sentence bothered me a little. Not enough to say no, just enough to make me reread it. I typed, "Sure, I can help if it's quick." Marcy responded immediately. Immediately. That's perfect. You're exactly who we need. I did not like that either, but I told myself she meant it kindly. Some neighborhoods took care of each other. Some older residents did not answer doors for people they had history with. Maybe a new face really was less stressful. Maybe this was the kind of community people complained did not exist anymore. That was the version I chose because it made saying yes feel decent instead of foolish. Marcy sent a private message a minute later. "Thank you again. It's just one check. Mrs. Bell near the end path. She gets anxious if too many of us come by." I asked for the address. Instead of typing one, Marcy sent a map pin. The pin sat at the far end of Briar Hollow Lane, past the last finished house where the road curved toward a line of low trees and an empty section of sidewalk. I had walked that way once during my first week. I remembered seeing lots marked with little builder signs, but no occupied homes past the last cul-de-sac. I messaged back, "Does this house have a number?" Marcy replied, "You'll see the porch light." That was not an answer. I looked out my front window. The street was settling into evening. Porch lights were coming on one by one. People were dragging branches to the curb. A kid rode a scooter in circles near a driveway while his dad swept leaves out of the gutter. Everything looked normal enough to make my hesitation feel dramatic. A few minutes later, my doorbell rang. It was Paul from across the street. He was retired, or close to it, with a neat white beard and the calm, practical voice of someone who fixed things before being asked. He stood on my porch holding a small brown paper bag by the handles. "Marcy asked me to drop this off," he said, "for the check." Inside the bag was a cheap flashlight, a bottle of water, and a laminated card on a blue lanyard. "Welfare check volunteer." My name was printed underneath. Not handwritten, printed. Below my name in smaller text were 4 words. "First approach approved." I looked up at Paul. "She already printed this?" He smiled like that was a good thing. "Marcy's efficient. I wanted to ask what first approach meant. I wanted to ask why a simple knock on a neighbor's door needed a laminated card with my name on it. But Paul was standing there looking helpful, and I was holding a bag of items meant for someone who might actually need help. So I only said okay. Paul nodded toward the end of the street. "Just be kind," he said. "That's usually enough." Then he walked back across the lawn before I could ask enough for what. I stood in my doorway with the paper bag in one hand and the laminated card in the other, feeling the first clean edge of something wrong. But the group chat was still open on my phone. Marcy had written, "Thanks again." She panics when people make it official. So I put the lanyard around my neck. I took the paper bag, and I started walking toward the end of the neighborhood. The farther I walked, the quieter the neighborhood became. That sounds obvious. The undeveloped end of Briar Hollow was never busy. But the quiet there felt different from the quiet near my house. Back there, people were still cleaning up after the wind. Garage doors were open. Leaf blowers whined. Kids shouted across driveways. At the end of the lane, all of that thinned out until I could hear my own shoes on the sidewalk. The paper bag swung lightly against my leg. Flashlight, water bottle, laminated card. I kept touching the card through my shirt as I walked, feeling its hard plastic edge tap against my chest. Welfare check. Volunteer, my name under it. First approach approved. The phrase bothered me more with every step. Approved by who? For what? I opened the group chat again while I walked. Marcy had sent another message. "Just a quick check. If she answers, tell her the neighborhood is making sure everyone is okay after the wind. No need to go inside." That helped. A little. No need to go inside. I repeated that in my head like a rule. I would knock. I would wait. I would leave the bag if she did not answer. I would not enter anyone's home. I would not make this more complicated than it needed to be. Then Paul added, "If she talks through the door, stay until she acknowledges you." I stopped walking. Stay until she acknowledges you. I typed, "What does that mean?" The message sat there for a few seconds before Marcy replied. Just so she knows it came from a person. She panics when things are left without a face. Again, it was almost reasonable. Older person, storm cleanup, maybe anxiety. Maybe too many neighbors had overwhelmed her in the past. Maybe this was just the awkward language of people trying to care for someone difficult. I kept walking. The last finished house on Briar Hollow Lane had a basketball hoop over the garage and 2 trash bags of broken branches near the curb. After that, the sidewalk continued, but the houses stopped. On one side was a stretch of low builder fencing, orange mesh sagging between metal stakes. On the other side was a line of young trees planted too evenly to look natural. The map pin was still ahead. There was no mailbox, no driveway, no house number, only a narrow concrete path branching off the main sidewalk and cutting between the trees. I checked the map again. The blue dot hovered almost exactly over the path. I typed Marcy privately. "I'm at the end. I don't see a number." Her answer came fast. "You'll see the porch light." I looked up. At first, I saw nothing but trees and the dull gray of evening. Then farther down the narrow path, a small yellow light appeared between branches. Not bright, not welcoming exactly. Just there, the kind of porch light someone leaves on, so a visitor has no excuse to say they could not find the house. I stood at the start of the path and looked back. From there, I could still see the last real house on the cul-de-sac. I could see a porch flag moving slightly in the wind. I could see the street sign. I could see far behind me the comfortable row of roofs where my house sat among all the others. That was why I kept going. If the path had felt remote, I would have turned around. If the light had been deep in the woods, I would have called someone. But it was not. It was still technically inside the neighborhood. Still within sight of mailboxes and lawn care and HOA rules. I told myself that mattered. The path was damp from sprinkler runoff or the storm the night before. Wet leaves stuck to the edges of the concrete. The trees on either side were low and young, but their branches leaned inward enough that the porch light blinked in and out as I walked. Halfway down, my phone buzzed. A message from Dana in the group chat. "You okay over there?" Before I could answer, Marcy replied for me. "He's got it." I stopped again. He's got it. Not asking me, answering for me. For a second, I felt irritation cut cleanly through the unease. I almost turned around just because of that message. But then I imagined how it would look in the chat. The new guy backing out halfway through a welfare check because someone phrased something badly. So I typed, "Almost there." Marcy sent a thumbs up. The porch light grew larger. The house came into view slowly. It was low and narrow, set back behind the trees, like it had been built before the subdivision decided what it wanted to be. The siding was a dull beige that looked gray in the fading light. There was a screened porch across the front, a single plastic chair inside it, and a doormat that looked too clean for the damp path leading up to it. No number on the door, no number on the post, no mailbox. A wind chime hung from the porch frame, but there was no wind by then. It turned slightly anyway, making one thin sound that faded before I reached the steps. I looked down at the laminated card again. First approach approved. I considered taking it off. Then I imagined Mrs. Bell opening the door and seeing me standing there without the thing Marcy had printed. I imagined having to explain why I had removed it. I imagined making a vulnerable old woman more anxious because I could not handle a plastic badge. So I left it around my neck. I climbed the porch steps. The screen door was closed. The wooden door behind it was shut. I knocked on the frame because knocking on the screen itself felt rude. Once. Twice. Then I waited. No answer. I lifted the paper bag ready to leave it beside the mat. That was when a woman's voice came from inside the house. "You're new." Not a question. A fact. I held the paper bag against my chest and did not answer right away. The voice had come from behind the wooden door, low and dry, an older woman's voice. Not loud. Not weak either. It sounded like someone who had been standing just inside the house long before I knocked. "Mrs. Bell?" I asked. Silence. Then the voice said, "That's what they call me when they send someone." I looked back toward the path. The porch light made the screen around me reflect faintly, so for a second I saw my own face floating over the dark trees. Beyond that, the cul-de-sac looked farther away than it had a minute earlier. Still visible, but small. Domestic. Out of reach in a way I did not like. "I'm just checking in," I said. "After the windstorm." The neighborhood wanted to make sure everyone was okay. The woman inside laughed once. Not amused, more like she recognized the words. "They told you to say neighborhood." I swallowed. The group chat buzzed in my hand. "Marcy, could you wait until she acknowledges? She panics if things are left without a face." I had not told them she was speaking. I typed back. She answered, "I'm heading back after I leave the bag." The message showed sending. It stayed that way. I checked the signal. 3 bars. My weather app refreshed. A notification from my bank loaded at the top of the screen. Everything worked except the message I needed to leave that porch. From inside, the woman said, "Don't step back yet." I looked up from my phone. The paper bag crinkled under my fingers. "I'm not coming in," I said. "I didn't ask you to." That was true. That was the problem with everything that night. No one asked the obviously wrong thing first. They asked the reasonable thing, then one smaller thing after that, until the place you stood no longer felt like a choice you had made. I set the bag down on the doormat. "There's water and a flashlight in there," I said. "If you need anything else, you can call Marcy." The woman was quiet for so long I thought she had walked away. Then she said Marcy doesn't come anymore. Something in the way she said anymore made me lift my eyes to the screen door. Behind the screen, the wooden door remained closed. No shadow under it, no movement through the side window. Just that porch light humming above my head and the faint smell of damp mulch from the beds around the house. "She said you might be more comfortable with someone new," I said. The words felt stupid as soon as I said them. The woman breathed in. They sent the right kind this time. I took one step back. The floorboard under my heel creaked, and the wind chime above the porch gave one thin metallic note, even though the air was still. My phone buzzed again. Paul this time. "Stay until she acknowledges the card." The card. Not the bag. Not me. The card. I looked down at the laminated badge hanging from my neck. Welfare check, volunteer. My name printed cleanly under it. First approach, approved. I typed, "Why does the card matter?" The message did not send. Behind the door, the woman said, "Did they tell you to be kind?" I did not answer. She said they always send kind ones first. I told myself she was confused. I told myself she was old, anxious, maybe afraid of the neighbors for reasons I did not understand. I told myself that abandoning her mid-conversation would be exactly the kind of thing I had agreed not to do. Still, my hand went to the lanyard. The plastic card was warm from lying against my chest. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. The woman answered immediately, "Leave it." I looked at the bag. I did. Not that. The porch seemed smaller then. I could feel the screen behind me, the door in front of me, the side wall close to my shoulder. The polite version of the situation was collapsing, but not quickly enough to give me permission to run. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The card with your name," she said. "They don't let you keep it." I looked down again. My name looked too black under the porch light. I unclipped the lanyard from my neck, but did not let go of it. That was as far as I could make myself go. Some part of me still thought handing over the card might be the exact thing I should not do. A soft sound came from inside. Not footsteps. Something sliding against wood. Then the woman said closer to the door now, They count it if you stay on the porch. I felt my throat tighten. Count what? No answer. My group chat finally changed. The message to Marcy disappeared. Not failed, not sent, just gone from the text box. A new message appeared from Marcy. You're doing great. I had not told her anything. I backed away another half step, and the screen door tapped lightly against my shoulder. That was when I saw the clipboard. It hung on the inside wall of the screened porch, half hidden by the shadow of a hanging fern. I had missed it when I came in because I had been looking at the door. It was an ordinary brown clipboard with a laminated sheet clipped to it, the kind you might see at a community pool or a volunteer table. At the top, printed in blue letters, were the words, "Welfare Rotation." Below that were names. Not many, maybe 12. Most were crossed out with a thin black line. One row near the bottom was not crossed out. My name. Under the column marked contact type it said, "New." Under status it said, "Pending handoff." And in the notes column, printed smaller than the rest, "Responds to welfare language." I stopped breathing. From inside the house, the woman whispered, "You read it." The wind chime moved again. One note, then another. And behind the closed wooden door, something laughed very softly, like it had been waiting for me to understand which part of the favor was really mine. I did not touch the clipboard. That was one of the few smart things I did that night. I wanted to. My name was there, my status was there. Some short printed version of my personality was there, reduced to a method for getting me to stand on a porch I should have left 10 minutes earlier. Every instinct in me wanted to rip the page down and take it with me because paper felt like proof. But proof only helps if you can explain how you got it. And I was standing inside a screened porch at the end of a path that had no address, holding a volunteer card I had not asked for, listening to an old woman talk through a locked door. If I took the roster, I would become the person stealing from a welfare check. That was how the trap kept tightening. From inside, the woman said, "Leave the card." I looked at the lanyard in my hand. "No," I said. It came out quieter than I wanted. The silence after it felt wrong. Not shocked, not angry, patient. Then the woman said, "They told you not to say that." No one had told me that, not directly, but she was right in the way that mattered. Everything before this had been arranged so no would feel like the one impolite word in a night full of kind ones. I backed toward the screen door. My shoulder brushed the hanging fern, and a few dry leaves broke loose onto the porch floor. I turned to find the latch. That was when I saw the thing in the corner. At first, it was only a shape under a gray tarp, a rounded lid, 2 black wheels, blue plastic showing through where the tarp had slipped. The porch light caught the front just enough for me to see the white number painted on it, 41. I stared at it. The number meant nothing to me then, not in any useful way. I had not lived in Briar Hollow long enough to know everyone's bins or old routes or local habits. It was just another wrong detail stacked on top of the others. But it felt placed. The handle was clean. Too clean for a bin left outside. Around the wheels, dried mud had hardened in dark ridges, even though the path outside was only damp leaves and concrete. The woman behind the door spoke again. Some things come back until someone carries them right. I reached for the screen door latch. It did not open the first time. My hand slipped because my palm was sweating. The second time, the latch lifted with a soft metallic click. My phone rang before I could push the door. Paul. I almost did not answer. Then I thought of the path outside. The trees, the house with no number, the old woman behind the door who knew what was printed on the card around my neck. I answered. "I'm leaving," I said before he could speak. "This is weird." There was a pause, not concern, calculation. Then Paul asked, "Did she take the card?" I looked down at the lanyard in my fist. "That's what you're asking. Just answer me," he said. His voice had changed. The practical friendliness was still there, but something under it had gone flat. "No," I said. "She didn't take it." Behind the door, the woman made a small sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been disappointment. Paul exhaled. "Okay," he said. "Then leave it on the porch. Number." "Listen to me," he said. "It's easier if you leave it. Easier." There was that kind of word again. Not safer. Not better. Easier. For who, I asked. Paul did not answer. Behind me, the wooden door clicked. Not opening. Unlocking. The sound was small, but it moved through me so completely that I stopped arguing. I dropped the lanyard on the doormat beside the paper bag and shoved the screen door open. The old woman inside said, "Good." I stepped off the porch. The path looked longer going back. That is the only way I can describe it without making it sound impossible. It was the same concrete path between the same low trees. I could still see the faint shape of the cul-de-sac at the end. but the distance felt stretched like the sidewalk had become a hallway and someone had moved the exit farther away while I was looking at the door. I walked fast, not running. Running would have meant I had admitted something I still did not have words for. The wind chime began ringing behind me. Not one thin note now, several, fast and uneven though the trees around me did not move. My phone was still connected to Paul. He said my name once. I did not answer. Then he said, "Don't turn around if she calls you." I almost did then because the human brain is stupid about instructions. The second he said it, I became aware of the porch behind me, the yellow light, the screen door, the wooden door that had clicked unlocked. Then the woman called from the house. Not loudly, not desperately, kindly. "You forgot to tell me goodbye." I kept walking. The path curved left, though I did not remember it curving before. Wet leaves stuck to my shoes. The flashlight in the paper bag thumped against my leg, and I realized I had somehow picked the bag back up. I did not remember doing that. At the end of the path, the cul-de-sac appeared all at once. Streetlights, mailboxes, the last finished house with the basketball hoop. Normal neighborhood. Marcy and Paul stood near the curb, waiting. Paul lowered his phone from his ear as I came out of the trees. Marcy looked relieved, not surprised, relieved. "You did great," she said. I looked down at my hands. The paper bag was still there, but the laminated card was gone. Back on the porch, where I had left it, where they had needed me to leave it. I did not ask them anything at first. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, the wrong thing would come out. Something too big, something that would make me sound unstable on a quiet suburban street where two neighbors were only standing under a streetlight after checking on an old woman. Marcy reached for the paper bag. I stepped back before she touched it. Her smile faltered, only for a second. Then it returned softer. "You can keep that," she said. "The card is the important part." Paul looked past me toward the path. He did not ask if I was okay. That bothered me more than anything he could have said. My shirt was damp with sweat. My hands were shaking. I had come out of the trees fast enough that my shoes had slipped on the wet leaves near the sidewalk, and neither of them asked if I was okay. Marcy clasped her hands in front of her. "I know that felt strange," she said. I stared at her. Felt. She responds better when someone new doesn't ask too much. There it was again. Better. Easier. Right kind. Words that sounded like care until you noticed they were all about making someone comply. "What is that house?" I asked. Paul finally looked at me. "It's not really about the house." That was the first honest thing anyone had said all night, and it made me feel worse. Marcy gave him a look. Then she turned back to me. "Some people in the neighborhood have needs that don't fit cleanly into normal systems," she said. "We help where we can." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the sentence sounded like something from an HOA newsletter, written by someone covering up a sinkhole. "There's a roster on that porch," I said. "My name was on it." Marcy's expression did not change. "That's just organization." There was a note about me. Paul said, "Marcy, we should let him go home." I looked at him. "You knew." He did not deny it. He only said, "You did the right thing." The right thing. That was the moment I stopped caring about being polite. "No," I said, "I'm done. Do not ask me for anything else." Marcy's face softened in that practiced way people use when they want anger to look like misunderstanding. "Of course," she said. "No pressure." I hated those words by then. I walked home without saying anything else. I could feel them behind me for the first few houses, not following exactly, just remaining there at the curb while I moved away. By the time I reached my driveway, they were gone. The first thing I did inside was lock the door. The second thing I did was take screenshots. The group chat, Marcy's private messages, the map pin, Paul's message about staying until Mrs. Bell acknowledged me, the line about the card. I called the non-emergency police number before I could talk myself out of it. The dispatcher asked for the address. I gave her the pin location because there was no address. She asked for the nearest intersection. I gave her Briar Hollow Lane and the cul-de-sac at the undeveloped end. She asked what happened. That was where the story became hard. I said neighbors had asked me to conduct a welfare check. I said the location did not appear to have a house number. I said there was an older woman inside a house off a side path. I said there was a roster with my name on it, and I did not understand why. I did not mention the blue bin. I do not know why. Maybe because it felt too small. Maybe because it felt too strange. Maybe because I already sounded like a person trying to make a normal neighborhood favor into something criminal. The dispatcher stayed professional. She said an officer would drive through and check the area. Then she told me to remain at home. I did. At 9:18, an officer called me back. He said he had gone to the end of Briar Hollow Lane. He found the side path. He found the young trees. He found an HOA maintenance sign and a stretch of undeveloped common land. No active residence, no screened porch, no house. I told him that was impossible. He did not argue with me. That was almost worse. He said county records showed that parcel as common property owned by the association. No utilities, no certificate of occupancy, no registered address. I pulled up the screenshots to send him the map pin. The group chat was gone, not the app, not my other conversations, just that neighborhood chat. I had been removed. Marcy's private messages were still there, but the map pin preview no longer loaded. It showed a gray box and the words location unavailable. I sent what I had. The officer said he would attach it to the call notes. Call notes, not a report. Not yet. He said if anyone came to my door or if I felt unsafe, I should call again. After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen and looked at the brown paper bag on the table. I had forgotten I was still holding it when I came inside. The water bottle was there. The flashlight was there. Nothing else. At 10:03, someone knocked softly on my front door. I did not move. My phone buzzed. A private message from Dana, the woman with 2 kids who live near the mailboxes. Don't answer if it's Marcy. I typed back. What is going on? Dana's reply took almost a minute. They asked me my first month too. I said no. I waited. Then another message came through. They stopped asking me things after that. I asked, what happens if you say yes? The typing dots disappeared. Then Dana wrote, I don't know, but nobody gets asked twice. The knock came again, soft, patient. I looked through the peephole. No one was there, only the porch light on. And on the welcome mat placed neatly in the center was the empty blue lanyard. No card attached, just the lanyard, folded into a circle like it had been returned. I did not open the door for the lanyard. I took a picture through the peephole instead. It came out warped and dim, the porch light bending around the edges of the lens, the blue fabric lying on the mat like something soft and harmless. In the photo, it looked like nothing. A lost lanyard, a neighbor returning something I had dropped. That was the problem with all of it. Every piece looked small by itself. A group chat, a welfare check, a printed card, a path near the unfinished lots, a woman behind a door, a lanyard on a mat. Try explaining those things in the wrong order, and you become the strange one. So I left it there until morning. By then it was gone. No message from Marcy, no follow-up from Paul, no new group chat invite. Dana did not text again either. The neighborhood went back to being the kind of neighborhood people pay extra to live in. Lawn crews came on Tuesday, trash pickup came on Wednesday. A man in a polo shirt measured a fence 2 houses down. Kids rode bikes after school. Paul waved at me from across the street like nothing had changed. Marcy left a small bag of zucchini from her garden on Dana's porch, then mine, then the couple's next door. I did not bring mine inside. It sat there until the vegetables softened in the heat, and I threw the whole bag away without touching anything but the handles. For a while, I almost convinced myself the safest thing was silence. That is what polite communities count on. Not fear exactly, embarrassment. Nobody wants to be the person who turns a weird favor into a neighborhood war. Nobody wants to be the new homeowner who starts calling the police over women with clipboards and welfare checks. So you begin editing your own memory to make it easier to live beside people. 3 weeks passed. Then the HOA welcome packet arrived. It was a thick white envelope in my mailbox with the Briar Hollow Association logo printed in the corner. I had received digital copies of most of it already, but this one looked official in the way paper still can. Heavy envelope, clean labels, my name spelled correctly. Inside were the usual things: a neighborhood map, trash and recycling schedule, pool rules, architectural guidelines, emergency contact sheet. At the very back was a page titled Volunteer Rotation Summary. I nearly missed it. My name was listed halfway down the page under a section labeled Welfare Check Rotation. Beside it in small print were the words, Completed Initial Visit. There was a date, that Sunday. The time listed was 6:17 p.m. I had not even left my house at 6:17. I know that because I checked the doorbell footage later. At 6:17, I was standing in my kitchen reading Marcy's first message, still deciding whether to answer. The welfare check had not happened yet. Paul had not come by with the bag. I had not walked toward the end path. But the rotation summary said it was completed. There was also a signature, not a handwritten one, an electronic signature made of clean black lines trying to look personal. It was my name. It was not my signature. At the bottom of the page under notes, one line had been highlighted in pale yellow. Suitable for polite approach. Do not send twice. I read it until the words stopped making sense. Do not send twice. Not completed, not volunteered, not helped. Send. Like I had been delivered somewhere. Behind that page was a smaller envelope. No stamp, no address. Just tucked into the packet like it belonged there. Inside was the laminated card, the same one I had left on the porch. Welfare check, volunteer. My name, first approach approved. Except now one corner had been punched with a small round hole. The plastic around it was slightly cracked, like the card had been clipped tagged, or used in some machine that did not quite fit it. On the back was a smear of dried mud, dark brown, grainy. I knew that color before I knew why. The wheels on the blue bin under the tarp, the one marked 41. I set the card on the table and backed away from it. I called the HOA office number printed on the packet. It rang to a voicemail with Marcy's voice on the greeting. Of course it did. I hung up before the beep. That evening I checked the doorbell camera. I do not know what I expected. Someone delivering the packet, Marcy walking up to the mailbox, Paul's truck stopping near the curb, anything with a person in it. The motion log had one clip from 6:17 p.m. Again that time. The video showed my front yard from the porch angle. The street was quiet. The light was beginning to go gray. No cars passed. No one crossed the frame. For most of the clip, nothing happened. Then there was a sound, low and hollow, plastic wheels rolling slowly over pavement. I turned the volume up. The sound came from near the curb outside the camera's view. A soft scrape, a pause, another slow roll. Then the porch camera glitched for less than a second. Not static exactly, more like the image bent at the edges, as if the lens had tried to focus on something just out of frame and failed. When it cleared, there was still no one there. No bin, no person, nothing on the sidewalk. I went outside with my phone in my hand. I did not step past the porch at first. I stood there listening to the evening settle around me. A garage door closed somewhere. A dog barked twice. Sprinklers clicked on down the block. Normal neighborhood sounds. That was when I saw the pavement in front of my driveway. There was a clean rectangle near the curb. Not wet, not stained, clean. The exact size of a city recycling bin. Around it, the pavement had the usual dust and pollen, and little scraps of leaves blown in from the storm. But inside that rectangle, the concrete looked wiped down like something had stood there long enough to keep the dirt away and had only recently been moved. I walked closer. There were two faint wheel marks leading away from it. They stopped at the edge of the street. Not faded. Stopped, as if whatever had made them had been lifted straight up. Across the road, Paul's curtains moved, only slightly. I looked at Marcy's house. Her porch light was on. Dana's house was dark except for one upstairs window. For a second, I thought I saw her standing there watching me from behind the blinds. Then the blinds closed. I went back inside. I did not throw the packet away. I should have. I know I should have. But I kept it in a drawer with the laminated card sealed inside a plastic freezer bag, because some part of me still believed that if I held on to enough pieces, they would eventually become proof. They never did. A month later, I sold the house at a loss. People always ask why I did not stay and fight it. The answer is that I could not figure out what I was fighting. NHOA packet, a missing group chat, a house with no address, a welfare check that county records said never happened. Every version made me sound unreasonable. And that was the cleanest part of the whole thing. They never had to threaten me. They only had to make sure the truth sounded rude. I thought I had only done a favor, but the packet said I had completed an initial visit. And whatever that meant, they already knew not to send me twice. If there is one thing these stories have in common, it is not that every neighbor was evil. It is that danger can sound very reasonable when it knows how to ask nicely. A favor, a complaint, a quick check, a harmless request. Those are the kinds of things most people agree to before they know what they are really agreeing to. If one of these stories stayed with you, leave a comment with the number that unsettled you the most. And if you have ever had a neighbor ask for something that felt wrong, only after you said yes, I would like to hear about it. Just be careful who you are polite to. Sometimes being nice is the first door you open.